Hello and welcome to episode 200 of the Crate and Crowbar.
Oh my god.
Hooray!
Hey!
We've made it this far.
Pip, what's your reaction noise?
Bicentennial, la 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 la.
Great. You can mash that together into a cheer of your own preference.
Devising. So 4 years ago, we were sitting in a graveyard, huddled around a silver microphone, telling stories of... I went back and listened to a chunk of episode 1. It was Civ 4? There's only been one Civ in that time. Oh no, 2 Civs. There's been 2 Civs. Dota, would you believe it?
Would you believe it?
I think Mask comes up.
Of course.
MASQ.
Splunky, presumably, even though it hadn't come out yet.
Yeah,
I think Splunky was like really big with episode 2.
Yeah.
And then for the following 17 episodes.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Chris Thurston, I should mention. And joining me on the podcast tonight are Pip War,
Hello.
Tom Francis,
Hello.
and Tom Senior.
Good day.
We should note that we did attempt to make some Graham and Marsh related plans for this episode, but Graham moving house and Marsh is in America. So screw those guys. We don't need them.
They are officially listed as dead to us on the website.
Yeah. I rewrote that widget in a fit of pique. But no, we may well try and do some sort of some more episode 200 celebratory things in the coming weeks. But actually, this episode has fallen at literally the worst possible time for all of the people that would be looking to get back. So, to celebrate 200 episodes, we're just going to do another episode of the podcast.
You know what we should have done? Is just got 2 people that we know who've never been on the podcast before and brought them back as if they were the original 2 members. We got the whole team back together.
We've recast Marsh and
Jeff.
Graham. Everyone remembers Jeff.
Here's Kate.
Forgotten Jeff.
We could have just done impressions. No one would have known.
Could we?
Well, not me, obviously. That would be a disaster.
I can do an impression of Marsh.
Can you?
Shit so far.
There you go. That's how he's feeling about this right now. From America. But no, 200. It's kind of nuts. I mean, it was actually more than 4 years ago now because we started in June 2013. Yeah, I very much remember the trip to the pub where we named this podcast, having had about 100 worse ideas before we got to this one. And it's just
What were the worst ideas?
you can find out almost all of the worst ideas at the end of the very first episode of the show.
Oh.
Because we listed them all, apart from the ones that we had to bleep for either taste or libel reasons. Because some of them were libelous. Maybe not full libel. British libel. Like, not one of your slightly more relaxed foreign libels.
We had a spreadsheet to vote on which ones we liked, and then Marsh hacked it to make us all vote for...
Hitler was right.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. We weren't going to fall for that because it wasn't like an automated system.
Can't argue with the popular will. I guess I don't remember
this
voting for
this
this.
was in the naive years before the will of the people could be skewed quite dramatically. But no, we've kind of nuts to think that we've done this 200 times now.
Yeah, slightly more because we did some specials.
Yeah. And that's time, everybody. That's how that works. The more weeks that pass, the more of these we do. And the same is true of news.
It's so great.
Thanks, man.
Wow.
I mean, from time passes, you can go almost anywhere.
You can, yeah. That's like the baseline segue.
Well, some time has passed, so...
Change is inevitable. So, news this week. So actually, to dial it back all the way to episode 1, some of the news is Dota related. In that the Dota 2 International 2017 began its group stages today, and they'll be finishing up by the time you listen to this. And then the main event will start next Monday, which is very exciting if you're me and a decent number of other people.
The prize pool is 10. Oh, wait. The
20.
first.
3.3 million.
Right. And first place is 10 million.
It's
Right?
10 point something. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. Yeah, it's exciting. And so I think we won't go into too much detail on it. It's weird, this being the first one that I am watching from home since
Oh, cry me a river.
I will.
The Crimea River. What's that concept?
I had to watch it from home last year while Chris was out there tweeting about it.
Right.
That was, I
Having
have
a fabulous
no
time on my
sympathy for
own.
this.
Well, I have sympathy for this.
For all myself.
Which is weird. But I wanted to mention it because I think a question came up on the pod a few weeks ago about getting into these things. We had a discussion about it. They are running a new version of the newcomer experience this year. I don't think they're doing a dedicated newcomer stream again because, as we discussed last time this came up, that was had some flaws conceptually. But what they are doing is a sort of UI for the game that is a lot more explanatory with like basic information about characters and tooltips and stuff so that you can mouse over. I think this is, I suspect this is a browser thing because Valve has a really good proprietary streaming thing that you can use instead of Twitch that pulls a lot more information from the game API than Twitch does. I believe this is a version of that which will sort of furnish you with extra information if that's what you need in order to understand it, which is probably the best way to do it at this point. Take someone's existing enthusiasm and just give them the tools to learn stuff as it happens rather than try and explain everything from first principles, i.e. time, every single time the game starts. So yeah, it's exciting. I'll be staying up to watch what I can and getting up early to watch what I can't. Because that's time. The theme for this episode, time.
I will have maybe nearly finished a single GSL season in the 6 months since I got back into StarCraft 2 watching.
How's that going?
It's cool. There's a few too many Terrans in the final selection for my liking. I only watch games with at least one non-Terran in them. And I root for anyone who's playing Zerg. But just the commentary and just kind of following the gist of like different players' styles and stuff is what I like out of that. And I never really clicked with watching Dota. The newbie stream helped, but it was always just a case of like, when things are happening on screen, I just can't tell what's happening. It's just a big flash of colours and stuff. So it's always a bit of a struggle to follow that.
You could come over at the weekend, and watch bits of it. Like, it won't be on, but there'll be the recaps and stuff, so if you wanted.
Will you explain it all to me?
We can have a Dota party.
Yeah.
Oh, that could be cool.
Yeah.
True. I've got to, we've got to record some more Bloodborne as well, so maybe
We do, yeah.
turn them into one activity.
Party!
Party,
Yeah, you can work for Bloodborne. Dota party in the evening.
Crane Grobel, Dota Party.
That's just games that people compare to Dark Souls. All day.
Love it.
Good. So I'm not going to try to segue to this because there is none. Sam Barlow's new game this summer. I was thinking about it, but I was going to get all the way back to time before I figured out the connection between Dota 2 and Her Story.
Yeah, it's been a sort of strange, quite low-key announcement process for this, because about, I don't know how long ago, but months ago, he just sort of posted a picture of the front page of the script to Her Story 2. And that was the announcement of Her Story 2. And then I don't think there's been anything since then until like the other week when an article on Variety, I think, announced that he is working on a game called Telling Lies.
Yes.
Right.
Good guess.
And you're an FBI agent searching some kind of database, are you?
Apparently it's some sort of socio-political drama?
And I mean, I haven't even definitively seen that, like him saying that this is Her Story 2, but it sure sounds like, I mean, it must be, because he's also working on War Games, which is a TV series, I believe. And I can't believe he's doing that and 2 other games, one of which is a lot like Her Story, but not called.
I saw it described as a spiritual successor to Her Story.
Yeah.
So I don't think you would do a spiritual successor and a successor.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the ghost and the
And
body.
that was kind of, I think, makes sense that he's doing a sequel. It also makes sense that it's not literally just following on from the last one, because that wasn't a plot you could just sort of tack on to the end of, right?
Her next story.
Yeah, I'm glad it's a new thing. And being an investigator makes maybe more sense for the kind of interaction that you have in those games.
Yeah, I think the other thing is so we mentioned 3 or 4 characters rather than 1, which makes sense if you're doing an investigation.
It's hugely exciting. The theme Telling Lies is just such a perfect, like I'm already thinking about how that would mesh with the format.
Yeah.
And, it's so exciting. Her Story is fantastic. brilliantly kind of conceived, does, what it sets out to do so well, and like has rescued the FMV genre. Like FMV has been, historically, traditionally like associated with very bad old PC games.
But in a way, doesn't it kind of create the FMV genre? Because there was never a good one, right? And FMV was pretty much always a stand-in for CGI graphics, right? Like a cheaper way of doing real people. So this was like the first use of like a real human being in a game I can think of where that was 100% necessary. Like,
yeah, I guess you could look back to the Myst games and Abduction more recently, where they use kind of strange full motion video 2D cutouts of characters to interact with you, and it's never quite worked, I don't think. And maybe even going back to like there's some of the Zork games used to do it, but this is the first time where it's like it's you leveraging a proper human performance, a really good human performance, to add to the drama and add to the kind of the point of the game. It's just a good game for having actors in it.
I think FMV was probably being used to greater effect outside gaming. Like, obviously, because at that point it would just be video, but, like, you could do interactive projects, and, like, I think there are some artworks out there that tapped into that in a sort of more ambiguous, interesting way. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's part of a continuum coming from the other direction, like into games rather than out from games.
Yeah, FMV was the last sort of genre I expected to see mechanical innovation in. Like, the thing that's cool about Her Story is the search system. And as it happens, that is a mechanic that means all of your content could be completely pre-recorded and non-interactive, and the game can still feel really interactive, and the story that ends up coming out of it, even though the story is fixed, the way it's told is down to player choice and player ingenuity.
Actually, I think museum exhibits do versions of that often. So you'd you'd search for whatever search term you as a visitor would have in mind, and then it would spit up a bunch of like potential clips that you could watch to play about the things that are in the museum. It's that kind of thing that it reminds me of far more than games. So.
That's true. I mean, and I guess it is literally a game about searching archival material, so museums are kind of natural fit for that. I've been thinking about it a lot recently, because it's that script, amazing as that script is, because it has to work both mechanically and with a very human performance, is just trying to learn some lessons from it, because we're doing something similar, different but similar with Hagmud in terms of storytelling through archival fragmentary material that can be encountered in any order, and it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a lot of respect for it anyway, and now I have even more than that previous amount. If you could quantify it in some way rather than just the feeling of respect, then you would appreciate that had gone up.
Double plus respect.
Indeed. Yeah. At least 7 more. So yeah, not much more known about that yet, but it has been a good week for narrative games.
Yes.
Look, I'm going to try and thread one segue through this entire episode until I give up, and you're just going to have to deal with that. Pip, you're doing a disgusted face.
No, okay. I mean, fine. Good.
Pip's entirely on board with this.
Look, I'm just trying to follow what you're talking about, but I keep thinking about ducks, and I can't help it. And it's making concentrating quite difficult. So that was my concentration phase.
Or maybe we just need to work through this. So what is it about ducks that's...
No. I don't want to derail things. I'm just trying to explain that my mind wasn't on the thing, and that was the concentration of trying to bring it back into line.
Okay.
Was your disgusted expression because you hate ducks? Fucking ducks. So pissed off with the ducks.
It was the idea of like trying to hold on to like the tiny image of the duck while also actually having engaged with what Chris was saying. It's really hard.
This happens every time I talk, doesn't it?
A little bit.
I feel like we're playing Pip's story. Really
Just type ducks and you get any clip.
I really do think that there should be a little like face guard, like the horses that have blinkers to stop them from getting distracted. I think either Chris or I should have them so he can't see what face I'm making and then ask about it, because it's not good for keeping us on track with the narrative game segue that you were making.
Thanks for segueing back. But yeah, okay. Well, Pip's thinking about ducks. But Pip, you should weigh into this because you played every single game that's come out this week.
Well, I mean, not all of them. Some of them. Many of them, in fact. All 3 that you mean that we're talking about right now?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
Which one do you want to start with?
Well, so 2 games have left early access this week.
Right.
They've been early access for a long time. They would be Slime Rancher and Long Dark. Mm-hmm. So Slime Rancher we talked about relatively recently, but I know you've played loads more of it. Have your feelings evolved towards Slime Rancher, or have they stayed the same, as in, like, you've probably done a crime, but it's nice?
I mean, yeah, it's been more of the same, but I just really enjoy it. So I've been sticking around and exploring different ways of farming my slimes and just climbing up through the ranks of the loyalty points and things that you can buy, like, just finishing off my ranch in as much as you can throw money at it.
I thought it was a game that ended.
Well, I mean, you can trigger a credit sequence.
Right.
But then after that, it deposits you, like back in the world, and you can just like finish off whatever you fancied doing or just keep going ad infinitum, Mm. So, and I think they've also announced a few new slimes that would be coming in a couple of builds and things and
New slimes.
New slimes to keep people excited, because I think one of the things that would have been a bit, is if, the 1.0 build had just been the end, It was... So I think they've sort of made definite efforts at keeping it open and keeping going and things.
The Prison Architect guys had the opposite problem, where they kept, after 1.0, they just kept on adding to it at the same rate they were before, and eventually their community kind of rebelled. Like, please stop, just finish the stuff that's there.
Yeah.
And stop adding new features, because it was ending up being disruptive, and they had to sort of have a moment of like, oh, okay.
I think it's one of those things where I was satisfied with the end point that it gets to with the credit sequence, and then I was also like my ranch was still enough of a living thing that I was able to keep pottering.
Okay.
And still have a few things to find and open up, and
Cool.
That's what I was doing when you guys came round. That's why I didn't bother coming downstairs. I was like, they'll be here for a while, it's fine.
Whereas the slimes are transient.
They are until you capture them, imprison them, and make them poop.
That's so that's just left early access, and so is the Long Dark.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The Long Dark.
Well, the Long Dark left early access in that it is now the 1.0 build for the survival sandboxy stuff, but also they've added the first 2 episodes of the story campaign.
Okay.
So
that
that's
had
the
not
big
been in
change.
before.
No.
I see. Because that's a game that I've had on... I keep a little list of early access games that I'm planning to check out when they finally leave early access, because in general I just don't play early access, because I want to... If there's so many things to play, I only have time to give each thing one chance, so I might as well wait until the developers think it's ready. And that sounds good in theory, but then in practice you realise some people are just never going to fucking release their thing.
Yeah.
Because it's out and they're people are enjoying it, they're making money, they just keep on making money and making people happy and releasing good things and updating their game, those bastards. And so I never get to play it because I'm still waiting for a hypothetical.
And you just sit there watching
1.0.
them make bizarre choice after bizarre choice in terms of really? That's endearing?
Yeah, I know they can't, but I wish developers could just tell me privately, are you ever going to hit 1.0, or is this are you just happy with this? Because some games just kind of don't.
0.99999.
But anyway, this has been on my list for ages, and I'm so glad that it actually did have a release, and I will play it now. I haven't yet, but I bought it today.
I think if it makes a difference, I think it's only the first. It's definitely only the first 2 episodes of a multi-episode season that is.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it like a thing where you'd play the narrative thing first and then go to sandbox? I know that's obviously no one's done that because it hasn't existed before, but
I think it's a weird one because I haven't really got very far with the story mode stuff, but from having played that, it does treat it as if the first part is a tutorial. So, for example, it goes through the very basics of make a fire, collect a thing, here are some food things, here are some tools that you'll need, here's how you get out of this part. It drip feeds you that stuff, which is weird because of what for me, it explained and what it didn't explain properly. Like, there's a bit where you're making, and this is super early on, so it's not spoilers, but like, you're making rosehip tea. Like, that's a thing that you need to do. But I think in the actual game instructions, it doesn't tell you that you need to prepare the rose hips, only that you need water and rose hips that you've picked and, you know, over a fire kind of thing. But like, there's a crucial step missing, and I'd forgotten because it's been a while, and so I was kind of like, hang on, what do I need to do? Or like, you know, it was one of those moments where I was like, hang on, what's the thing that I'm missing? And as if I'd been a completely new player, I would possibly have just been flummoxed at that point, or, you know, whatever. And I think it doesn't teach you how to rest, because at the beginning it does it automatically for you. You know, it's a fade to black once you've done whatever's required of you in the daytime for those first few days. So it was kind of a weird mixture, and then I got eaten by a wolf, but that was because I was annoyed with my character, so I walked him into the wolf. So it was kind of a spite wolfing, to teach him a lesson that he didn't learn because he got eaten by a wolf.
And also you did it.
Well, sort of. But, I mean, have you never done that in a game? You just get so fed up with your character, you just, like, kill them.
There's that scene in Spaced where Tim is just repeatedly killing Lara Croft to relieve some of his stress.
Like, does no one else do that?
Yeah, well, I guess I've done that, but as a gesture of protest against the game, and I don't think I never really have that separation between me and the character enough for me to be punishing the character.
Oh, no,
like,
I do.
I always feel like it's me.
Oh, God, you're such a jerk. And, like, just make them walk off things for a while. And, like, you know, that's always quite therapeutic.
I definitely made Nathan Drake jump into some cliff walls and some jeeps because his jump is really amusingly pathetic. I didn't really feel any animosity towards him. I just found it funny.
It's just bullying.
I bullied Nathan Drake.
But yeah, but it's weird because in the sandboxy stuff, you do actually you can pick your difficulty. So you can have it so that the wildlife only attacks you if you're actually aggressing onto it. Whereas
Aggress onto the wildlife.
Yeah, that's the phrase, isn't it? That's
you start
phrasing
on them, yeah.
Structure. Yeah.
You fucking start. I'm a fucking wolf, mate. I'll fucking take it.
Get out the gauntlet and you whack the wolf across its nose, throw it down to the ground.
And the wolf's like, I don't have gauntlets. What am I doing in this scenario?
The wolf's like, what is this? Then he draws his saber. Then it's on.
Do you pour your nose at me, sir?
And it was a long dark.
Oh, God. I can't remember what we were talking about.
Ducks.
No, because
Darks.
The long duck.
So,
Is it a good survival game? Because most survival games I play are terrible.
well, that was what I was getting at, because I really, like, it's such a beautiful game and such a kind of desolate, snowy, kind of gorgeous, threatening experience, and I find it so even if the wolves aren't attacking and things, like, it's perfectly possible to die of hypothermia. It's perfectly possible to give yourself food poisoning by forgetting to cook meat. It's, you know, like, there's so much that can go wrong, or you just run out of resources to find, you know, that it struck me as a bit odd that the story campaign doesn't have the ability to select difficulty, because I would have thought if you want people to experience the story, fine, you might want to, like, judge the level of tension, so perhaps you'd make the settings slightly less unforgiving than in the sandboxy stuff. But, like, it struck me as odd that you don't get to choose at all, because for me, I'm like, well, you know, I'm bad enough at survival games that I can find a beginner's mode quite challenging and quite tense anyway. So, like, you've just made it so that I can't efficiently play your game without, like, loads of save scumming.
How's the narrative, like the storytelling?
Like I say, I haven't got far enough in. I know that John played it for work because he was the one reviewing it, and he wasn't a fan, but I didn't read the review because I tend not to if I know I'm going to play something. So I don't know specifically what the problems he had with, and whether they were things that would bother me as a person who perhaps has slightly different things that I like or don't like in stories. So I genuinely don't know.
Perhaps the dark was too long.
But yeah, so I just want to see a lot of Aurora. Aurorae.
Awesome. And so, yeah, and also out this week, and something that I believe we've all played a bit of, but Pip has finished.
I feel like I've just won the podcast, so I should just flounce off while everyone else does the work. I'll take the rum.
It's Tacoma, which feels like it's going to be a game that we come back to a bunch of times. So, obviously, the game came out today, so we're not going to do any spoilers or anything.
Yep.
But I guess the first thing would be like, how much has everyone played? So I know where our, chat should be calibrated.
I've had full Tacoma to completion. So.
Wow.
Great.
I've done the first kind of chunk, and if you play Tacoma, you'll know what that.
I've done exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
Okay, good.
I made time to play it before this podcast, and I allowed sort of about 2 hours, and then I got about 1 hour in and I hit the end of the first chunk, and there's such a natural point to stop that I just stopped there anyway.
I did exactly the same thing. Like, exactly the same thing. Wow.
We might all be doing it at totally different points in the game.
Yeah. Finished.
Also,
you can all write it down and hand it to me, and then I can compare.
So this relates to nothing, but for the last 2 hours since playing it, I have been singing the My Neighbor Totoro theme tune, but with Tacoma as the Tacoma, Tacoma.
So it's a game set on a space station where you wander its corridors and play basically just visual diaries. They're kind of augmented reality diaries of the crew that were on this station.
Yeah, the conceit is that the station records everything. It's owned by a corporation who sound, if not evil, at least very invasive. And they record everything their crew do. The station is wholly owned by them. All the people are their employees. They sign away all their rights to privacy and everything. And you have no information about what's happened there, but no one's around. And when you go there, you're able to see some of these recordings that the station has made of people, and they are holograms of people walking around. And you can kind of scrub back and forth. They're in discrete kind of areas. You go into an area, and this area has a bunch of stuff that happened in it, and you can, all the time that you're in that area, you can scrub back and forth through it, and it's all one big recording, rather than being like 4 or 5 audio diaries scattered around. The entire location is kind of one big video diary.
Yeah, and so the process of watching one of them is kind of like going into this area and then probably watching it from one character's perspective and hearing their conversations, and then someone will walk and join a different conversation halfway through, and then you might watch the rest of that, and then scrub back and watch the start of the thing that you ended up wandering into the second time around. And yeah, it's very organically piecing everything together. Yeah,
it's cool that mechanic. At first, I didn't sort of like the very first conversation. They draw attention to the fact that you're seeing the people. Someone makes reference to what they're doing, just to sort of remind you, like, hey, this isn't an audio diary. This is a bit different. But for that and the next conversation, I didn't really see that I was gaining much from seeing the people. And then eventually, it kind of clicked for me when I realized, like, I was watching a conversation and someone walks in kind of 60% of the way through the conversation. And then I realized if I scrub back, I would be able to see where they came from, and I could sort of follow them in reverse to find out where they came from, and then I can see what they were doing before this conversation. And so that's that mechanic really works for me in that way. Like, there's something very strangely cinematic, even though this is obviously a mechanic based entirely around interaction. It's very gamey. It's a thing that you could only really do in video games. So many movies have done the thing where they cut back, and now you see what these two people were talking about just before they entered the room, and that moment where the bit you just played joins into the bit that you already know about is a common, technique in films to kind of to tell you. And now you're back to the things you already know about, and the scene usually ends there. And of course, when you're playing, you stop the recording there because now you know what happens from then on.
It's interesting. Oh, sorry, go on, Pip.
Oh, I think we were probably going to say the same thing, in that it's a common thing in immersive theatre.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
So you can kind of, but with that, obviously, you don't have the ability to scrub back. You have to either go
Yeah.
the next day and follow a different person, or you have to sort of just make a choice and stick with it, and then ask what your friend who was also there heard, or
Yeah.
piece it together after the fact.
It did remind me of Sleep No More, actually.
Yeah, Sleep No More was exactly the example I was going to use.
In that that's an immersive theatre thing where dramatic scenes are happening all over this big house, and or big, I don't know, building. And it's up to you who you want to follow. And but that thing of running after somebody as they're just going on their own business and they have no idea you're there. Obviously, in Sleep No More, the actor does know you're there, but the character doesn't react to you in that situation. In this case, they're holograms, so they really can't, and it happened in the past time. And it's weird. There are little moments of there's something a little bit awkward about doing that, not in a bad way necessarily, but it jars that you know, you're kind of running backwards, or you're repeatedly pausing this person and then trying to figure out where they came from and go through their door, or they'll walk through solid objects, or they'll interact with things that aren't there anymore because they're in the past and you're in the present. But it all makes sense and is consistent.
That's something I really liked, was actually watching them go through the series of events, and you'd see the point at which that object was last interacted with, because it would suddenly, you know, join up with where it actually was for you in the present. Like, you know, you'd have, I don't know, something being moved, and you'd sort of see the shape of it from how the person was moving, but then they'd put it down and suddenly their hands would connect with the thing as it is in front of you. And you're like, oh, they were moving that, or they were, you know, like this is the thing that got it to how it was, or that moved it to being knocked in that way. Or
I found, I was wandering around while one of these recordings was playing, and I found a kind of glowing thing, and, you know, the recorded stuff is glowing usually, and the real world stuff is not. And as I looked closer, I realized it was a cat. I thought, oh, cool, let's see what the cat did in this recording, and rewound all the way to the start, and I went all the way through it, and fast forward, the cat does not move.
Cat's asleep.
the cat, like...
It does move at one point in that recording, but yeah.
But then it just settles back down. It's so cute.
Yeah, the attention to detail is really amazing. Like, partly in terms of, obviously, the amount of... it's an extremely detailed world. They've inherited a lot of... It's obviously by the people who made Gone Home, and it's inherited a lot of Gone Home's ability to pick things up, look at them, and then put them back down again. But obviously, a few years on, the fidelity of the items is higher. The quality of the imagination is greater, given that it's set in a space station, not a home. But also the amount of stuff you can interact with, like just being able to fully rack up and play a game of pool in the first area if you want.
That was fun.
And it's interesting because there's a sort of, you know, the sort of big quote unquote thing you're there to do is to sort of gather data from all of these different recordings. And there's a point, because everyone is wearing, they can be tracked because they're wearing the same AR.
Not exactly. You're only supposed to be there to pick up the AI. You're just downloading that to bring it back to the corporation.
Sure, but you get that data by reconstructing, like watching those scenes, right? Like,
I think you get it either way, don't you? Doesn't it just happen on a timer?
Oh,
Yeah,
I thought
like-
because you get the ticks when you've found all the things in this in the conversation.
What happens is, I think, I'm not quite... It's one of those things where I'm not quite sure what to say, because I'm not entirely sure what is... Something I would say is that the download happens anyway. Like, I've stood by it and checked that the percentage was ticking up. As you listen to the things that you can listen to, if you access everybody's data terminals when they're open during each of the recordings, it gets to 100% once you've accessed the last one of those. Like I went back to the beginning and just sort of tried that out. So it's essentially the data transfer is always done by the time you've run out of things to do. Yep. But I'm not sure whether that is like once you guys have finished it, I will.
The reason I mention it is because, and maybe not just in the context of the fiction, definitely in the context of the UI, that is the thing that you do in the game, because it highlights each of those. Because basically, whenever anyone brings up their personal AR interface, you can see that they're doing that.
You can
and
peer over their shoulder and
yeah.
interact with it.
Yeah, and doing that changes a thing on the UI from a question mark to a tick, which is as close to a kind of goal as the game gives you,
Yeah.
right? Like, whether or not that's strictly what you're there to do as a character, in terms of what am I, what is the indication to me that I'm done? And I agree, I appreciate that it's a lot more analog than that in a bunch of ways. That is the closest thing in the UI to a, objective complete, proceed to the next checkpoint kind of indication.
I found that slightly weird so far in that I'm very interested in the conversations that are acted out, that it's voiced and you're seeing these people walk around. And then the terminals thing is you sort of, it's kind of like the reading emails part of the game. Except they're not sitting at a computer. It's an interface that appears in front of them and you interact with that. And then there's usually 4 things in there to read. And often, a bunch of them are just flavor text or they're corrupted to the point that you can't read them. And so there's a bunch of stuff there that isn't or doesn't seem to me to be important. And I don't really want to sift through unimportant stuff to find the important stuff. I'm in kind of follow the story mode. I just want to be told the story basically. And so I'm really interested in the conversations. And then when like I say, the interface really is sort of prompting you, go read all these things or go interact with them at least. And I find I don't really want to. I just want to watch the conversation. And then I think, even aside from there being actually important information on those screens, they want to ensure that you've seen all the parts of the conversation because, just standing in one location won't get you all of it. You need to go, and by interacting with screens, you've proved that you've gone over there and you did see this conversation in this room because you've been close enough to press that button. So it works in that way. But I'm sort of tempted to just hit use on them and then quit straight back out and to just sort of tell it, yeah, I've seen it, and not actually read the stuff. But that's probably sacrilege.
I'd be interested to know what you think at the end of it if you do carry on doing that. Just because, I played it in the total opposite mode where I was happy to just sift through everything. And I mean everything. Everything I could touch, everything I could pick up, everything I could
So far, I
read.
haven't skipped any of them. I've at least skimmed through each thing. And often if I skim through and I see 70% of it's corrupted, I assume it's not super important and I don't read it. And then there have been little bits of important stuff, but
I found that there's almost an overwhelming amount of detail, in a good way, but it's made me realize that I'm not going to play this once. I'm probably going to play it 1.5 times and then read loads of interesting things so that people figure out about the story and about the way the characters relate to one another, because it feels like there's too much to hold in my head.
There are a couple of times where I'm like, oh, I think this might be going on, but I'm not going to bother to check. I'm sure I'll find out later.
Yeah, and obviously it's designed that you'll encounter things relatively non-linearly. There's lots of secrets. There's a big thing to figure out in terms of drawers you can unlock that contain letters that you can read that flesh out something else about a character's background. And there's so much in the environment that the part of me that goes, basically now I'm an hour in and I've given up on the idea that I'll get everything out of this the first time around, because it just feels like there's too much. And I'm going to need to go through again with more context and kind of watch for things I don't know to look for now.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing, because games are really good at that. But it's definitely initially I found it because it's very grounded and kind of realistic. It's set in a space station, but it's naturalistic in its kind of presentation of what that might be like. Of course, it introduces you to 6 characters straight away.
Yeah.
And allows you to encounter them in a completely non-linear fashion, and it relies on you to intuit who they are and intuit their relationships and so on. So I sort of found immediately okay, well, we'll go into, it's the same as Xing out of the text stuff that you don't feel is going to be useful right now. It's well, I've got to start picking something to focus on in this sea of information.
That's one thing I actually thought Gone Home did a bit better, was because it was just one thread. It meant there was no ambiguity there. You're immediately, or at least I was immediately gripped and just on this one person's journey. And here, the first time there was 6 people in a conversation, I was just I don't know. It took a while for me to settle into it.
Same. Don't know if that was your experience, but I know you played more of it before it was in its final version as well.
I played it a couple of times at GDC, so I think I was just automatically comfy with the interface, and so there wasn't any sense of getting to grips with it from that. But I think maybe this is the type of thing where this is my lore stuff where because it's people and because it's social, I've suddenly like gone and kept hold of it in my brain in a way that I can't with like fantasy or with, you know, all of that stuff. And so for me, the thing that Tom, you're describing as being like there being sort of too much and wanting to sort of find out the story stuff and everything else is a bit sort of by the by. For me, it was like watching all of these different threads come together and interweave, because I was sort of keeping track of them. And then it was like, oh, that one's met up with that one. And this thing is happening over here, but that it like corresponds to that advert that I saw ages ago and didn't think much of, but have like somehow kept the details in my mind, and it's carried on over here. And so there was just a sort of feeling of threads knitting together in really satisfying ways and sort of being picked up and dropped and picked up again. And I found that the corrupted bits made it feel not overwhelming, because with whenever anything asks me to 100% read something, I'm always just like, ugh, no, it feels like data scraping. But weirdly, because it's concealing a bunch of that stuff, it doesn't feel like I've had to read all of it. It feels like I've just had to read snippets of it, or like, you know, bits of it are corrupted, so I can just skim read the few phrases that are left.
Yeah, I've done that a bit, but there's something in my brain that reads corruption as sort of the game signaling, don't bother to read this, like this is not meant to be it's like not there yet or something.
I feel like
don't play hack mode.
If I knew that there was going to be 4 whole conversations I had to read every time I pressed on one of those AR things, I would not press on them anymore.
Yeah, that was my feeling. But like sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 2.
Like, and it could just be like one little snippet, and it feels.
And one of them might just be an advert. One of them might be like just a sentence in a chat log. You know, it's like, for me that feels a lot more manageable and a lot less like, and now we go to the grimoire cards.
Yeah,
like, oh god,
yeah,
Chris will tell me later.
Yeah, I definitely don't want that. I think I want it to be just the important stuff, or maybe just like I'll probably just get better at this as I play, is like recognizing which is flavor text and which is important. I want to find the important stuff really quickly. I don't want to spend any time sifting. I don't want to have to read something and then find out, oh, this is flavor text.
I think it's kind of awkward because for me, because it's so much also about the relationships, it all felt important, if you see what
so actually
I mean.
The distinction I'm talking about really is what is personal and what is not, because when it's like an advert, that is not personal, and when it's like I think I read, I'm not 100% sure, but I think there was a page that's just like part of a novel, and this is a common thing in immersive sims. There'll be a novel that you can read bit by bit in different pages, and I never do. Even in Deus Ex, which I've played like 25 times, I've never read the novel that's distributed throughout that. And so if it is an email or if it is a chat log, I do want to read it, but if it's not something that person wrote or that was written to that person, I don't want to read it.
I think
I would be so interested to do a spoiler podcast once everyone has played it, because I want to say so many things right now and I'm having to really bite my tongue.
I think there's the other thing that it's doing is it's introducing, I think, a really nicely conceived and interesting version of the future. And you need to understand the logic of that future in some ways to understand some of the things the characters are talking about, which is often the role played by the adverts and the kind of missives and the memos and the kind of, you know, sci-fi world building stuff that it does. So I did find that it's all necessary, but that again contributes to the sense that it's kind of I did find it's overwhelming, which is interesting because that's not an experience I've had with. I don't think there is a game like this really, like necessarily. Like I don't think it fits comfortably into walking sim in the way that the games do, because I think the thing that defines walking sim is that they're relatively linear, that you kind of proceed and they kind of glide around and they flow around you. Like Edith Finch kind of like flows around you as it happens. Like you can hit things that you don't necessarily twig on straight away, but it's just one scene naturally flowing into the next scene. It's a very linear narrative, where this feels much more like a sandbox, where you kind of do all that interpretive stuff at your own pace.
It's like, it's 4-dimensional storytelling, which could only happen in a virtual game environment. I think it's justified its gimmick basically by telling its story in a way that no other medium could. And when I first heard it described, I was slightly cynical about it because I compared it wrongly to Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, which is basically just you found the story node. Now you sit passively and watch the story node.
Yeah.
But it's not like that at all. It's actually, because it's, you're exploring, plot and relationships through space by rewinding time, following people back through corridors and that kind of thing. Feels like a thing that only a game could do. I can't imagine anything else creating that type of experience. And as you're getting these nuggets of information, it's creating that awesome internal process of you assembling this enormous jigsaw puzzle. And it feels as though you've had a choice about which bits of those puzzle you've uncovered at any given point. So the interactivity of it is also worthwhile. And I find the universe as it's been constructed so far to be very, very believable. Even down to the job your character is doing and the way that it feels as though you're getting like these little messages from a distant, controller, and the way they're delivered and the kind of, I can't go into it too much to spoil things, but it feels like you are just kind of a merc on a job in a way. And it's a great way to explore that space. It's really, really well done, I think.
There's a neat thing they do also with the characters, because they're just holograms and they, like, that whole conceit feels, at least to be designed to sort of get around the problem of having to realistically render 3D humans, which is a very difficult problem and a very expensive one to solve. And so they are very abstract and they've used that as an advantage to make them also brightly coloured. They all look a unique colour, and they also have a giant icon on their back that represents their job. And so there's a big like medical symbol on the back of the one who is presumably the doctor, or and like a cog symbol on the back of the engineer. And so even before you know who these characters are, and I still don't know, I couldn't tell you all of their names, you could show me a picture of any of them and I could tell you, oh, that's the engineer, or that's the, actually, I can't remember any others. Operations
There's
guy?
like a network person, there's a doctor.
The security
there's
person, I recognise that icon.
As operations director or something.
Yeah, that's the icon that I keep thinking is engineering, but it isn't.
I still don't understand quite what his job really is.
But it is at least distinct from engineering. If you show me them side by side, I can tell you which is which.
botanist.
Yeah.
I think the voices are really good as well. I think the performances have been really, as Chris said, like naturalistic and believable so far.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I think Tom, I think you're completely right that it is about, like, I think it's about possibly slowing down to kind of put the pieces together rather than feeling like, oh, I'm done now, time to move on to the next section. Because it's not like Gone Home where you have the person you are in that story has a personal reason to find out why your house is empty. And there's a very specific kind of emotional journey with that game. It's very linear. Whereas this feels like you are a voyeur, really. Like, your job isn't to uncover the intricate details of everyone's lives, find the keys to their secret drawers and read their letters and go through their bins. Like, your job is to do a specific thing. So, you sort of your kind of curiosity is more self-directed. And I think that what that means is that when you decide that you're done with an area, is a lot more self-imposed. Because obviously, there is the bit where it says 100%, complete, take your kit and go to the next area, but you're also encouraged to do your own thing a little bit, and if you want to keep exploring and scrubbing around and trying to find stuff, then you can. And I think that's interesting from a player motivation point of view, because that's what I mean. Like, I felt the reason I decided, I'm never going to do this in one go, is because I didn't want to feel like trapped in it, essentially, because with the absence of kind of hard and fast, you have seen all of the story now, it's safe to move on flags, because those little tick boxes are deceptive, right? That doesn't mean you've seen everything. It means you've done everything the UI wants you to do.
Yeah, sure.
Like, I find that can be paralyzing. That's the kind of the sandbox choice paralysis. That's why I compare it to a sandbox game. It's nothing like Assassin's Creed or something, but it has a similar kind of like self-directed kind of pick what your priorities are, decide when you've finished this kind of attitude. And rather than be paralyzed, I've just decided, okay, I'm going to play this once and get what I get out of it. Then I'm probably going to discover everything else that's in this game through conversations and people tweeting it, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, actually, weirdly, and I hate to do this because it's the thing people do. I suspect the comparison here is Dark Souls.
Not again.
And the reason for that is purely because there are so many things in the From Software games that you basically find out about when your mate says, oh, did you go to the thing and find the thing? If you do this before this, you see this, and that informs this later on, right? Like, you know, we're doing the Bloodborne playthrough at the moment, and that's 100% Tom pointing out to me, like, oh, if you go here after this boss, before this thing, you can see this thing happen. Which is not on the same scale as Tacoma, which is all taking place in these compressed environments in a very manageable way. But it's a similar sense of, like, I was never going to discover that myself, so I'm glad that someone else is there to show it to me. And I have this feeling this game is full of that. Not werewolves. Hidden story.
Yeah, I was... it's kind of, that's why I, at some point, really wanted to replay Prey, and the ending put me off replaying it a bit. But I think I still probably will, because it's that thing you were talking about where you don't have the context to understand what you're seeing the first time you see it. So it's very very hard to process it all. And the second time through, you just got so much more background to everything that's going on that everything makes way more sense, and the meaning of everything is clearer to you. And I think actually probably Prey is, I feel like Tacoma so far has done quite a good job of delivering to me all the information that I would probably need. And I get that there's loads more to discover about that. But it feels very, because it is all about the story, the essential parts of the story are presented to me in a way where it's easy to see how much of it I've seen. Whereas Prey is the story, there's a huge amount of story in the background that is, very much down to exploration and about combing through stuff. And I did that probably more in that game than I do in most immersive sims and stuff. But,
combing through stuff.
Tom physically deflated. It's now half the size.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I should go back to Prey.
I would say as well that it's a very pretty game, and there's a delightful sort of chunkiness to all the items, and a big smoothness to these enormous bulkheads that you're going through. And it's a realistically constructed space station as well, where there's like a central zero-G section with spindles that you get to via these enormous elevators that have gravity because they're slowly rotating around and using their centripetal force to hold you to the floor. There's a real license to the technology, like when you're downloading the AI, you do it with like this lovely chunky book thing. That
it's like a DS.
Yeah. You mean the Nintendo DS?
So I love the art direction as well. I'm really impressed by it. Really impressed by it. It's great.
Yeah, we should definitely do a spoiler pod. Probably it feels like it's ripe for that.
Yeah,
which Pip can lead because finally say all the things that you've been biting your tongue over.
Yeah, because we didn't do one on Gone Home, did we? That must have been around the time this podcast started, because it was also around the time of Gunpoint. Because Fulbright and Suspicious Developments are indie twins in terms of our first games came out around the same time, and we've both taken 3.5 years on our next games. Mine is not actually out, which is unfortunate.
And the second game both set in space.
Yep. Yeah, first game set on Earth.
First game begins with a G.
Yep.
I was really trying to find a Gone Home Gunpoint link there. There wasn't a lot to...
There are light switches in both of them.
That's true.
It's true.
One of them is about rewiring buildings. The other one is about...
A building.
A building.
You're definitely inside a spaceship in Tacoma at some point. And then inside a space station.
That's true. Both of those things are in Heat.
Yep.
Wow.
In Heat Signature, the spaceships are bigger and the space stations are smaller. That's the main difference between the games, I'd say. Other than that, it's more or less Tacoma.
Have you ported Gunpoint's like save rewind thing into Heatsig?
No.
Okay.
Because when I made Gunpoint, it was in GameMaker 8, and save and load in GameMaker 8, they told you not to use it. Like, don't use this, it's not supported, doesn't really work. And then I used it and it worked absolutely perfectly. And then in GameMaker Studio, which I'm using for Heat Signature, they tell you, don't use our save feature, it doesn't work. And I used it and it didn't work. I was like, all right, fine, I'll stop using it.
This is just to see who's paying attention.
Yeah, also it was, it kind of clashes a bit with a randomized game, because if you can save and load, then you can just scum it and get the best stuff all the time and never suffer any negative consequences. And so there's no kind of story to your journey. You don't have to ever deal with drawbacks or improvise or anything. You can always just make sure everything went perfectly for you. It fits much better. Gunpoint was, essentially a puzzle game where at some point you're going to just do the right solution and you have to progress. Whereas Heat Signature is much more kind of just, let's see what happens if you fuck up. So the approach I've taken instead with Heat Signature is that, as of like a few weeks ago, there is now nothing in the game that can kill you instantly. Everything that can kill you does so in a way where it's like, now you're in the danger state, and here's how you get out of the danger state. So there's always a way to recover from death. The ways of recovering from death may be too difficult because some people are still finding it like hugely frustrating. So we might need to tweak those. But yeah, the last thing to go was, so it's always like if someone shoots you aboard a ship, they'll pick you up and throw you out the airlock, and then you have a chance to pick yourself up with your own pod and save yourself that way. If you got shot in space for a while, that was instant death. And then I updated that so that now there's a recovery minigame. So your ship is like beeping and spinning and out of control, but you've got to like hold D to seal the coolant flaps, and don't press S because the flame vent is popping and the fuel gasket is totally missing, so you've got to hold W, and it's like a little chaotic kind of thing to make you panic. But if you do all that right, then your pod survives. And then the last thing that could still kill you instantly was if you're on a ship and then you shoot a fuel barrel or throw a breach grenade, something that's going to destroy the entire room you're in, that used to insta-kill you. And then I was testing it out at Develop, and somebody playing the game for the first time completed the tutorial, went out into the wide world, took their first mission, boarded an easy ship, and then was just immediately killed because a different ship crashed into it, which also destroys the module and kills you if you're inside it. So they had the harshest possible experience. And I realized, like, this situation is just way more interesting if you get thrown out into space and you're bleeding and you have to catch yourself, so you are in mortal peril, but you're not instantly killed. Like, if there's just a way to recover, it's always more interesting. It's never better to instantly die.
Which is interesting because Gunpoint was partly born from the genesis of like a gun should always kill you.
Yeah.
Like being killed with a gun is, yeah. Kill you, kill someone else.
You've either got to have the save every 5 seconds or you've got to have some way of recovering from death.
Interesting. But yeah, no, we definitely come back to Tacoma because it does seem great.
I think it's my game of the year so
Wow.
far. But it's going to be like Life is Strange, where I just get sick of like having the same conversation where I sort of stick up for it, if you see what I mean. So like by the end of the year, it'll be my game of the year. Don't ask me about it. I'm done.
Don't at me.
Do you think that people are not going to like it as much as you did?
I think it's more that the comment sections of anything give like a skewed thing. So I haven't waded in, but it's like, you know, there's a lot of, so why would I play this rather than a game that does storytelling but also lets me shoot things? You know, there's a lot of that kind of thing, or like, you know, yeah, but how long is it? Or, you know, like all of that stuff that's a little bit like, it's one of those things where it's an amazing game that definitely won't be for everybody. And I hate when you have to fly the flag for something that isn't for everybody, as in I'm happy to do it, but then you have a lot of pushback, and when a game is like something that you personally really enjoyed, or you know that you got a lot out of, sometimes that can just get really wearing, and that happened a lot with Life is Strange. It was kind of like having to explain to people why it wasn't for everybody, but why I really loved it, and then hearing all of the criticisms back at me each time was just like, you know, I think by the time we got to the Advent calendar / Game of the Year stuff at the end, I was just like, well, it's on my list and I'm done talking about it. It's just there. So, and that might sound really combative to like start with, but it's just like, it's one of those things where it definitely is the front runner right now for me.
Yeah.
But like, I can sense myself getting like a bit, why am I having these conversations again?
Yeah, that's something I don't miss about games journalism. Just, having to defend your opinion, or just knowing what the commenters are going to say, and having to, like, in your review, preemptively defend. I know you're going to think this, but...
Also, it's like, Tacoma is really clear about what it is. Like, I don't think anyone's going to get the sense that it's a shooter or any other sort of game.
Well, I saw a comment that someone was like, oh, this isn't the game I thought it was at all, and I think they thought it was going to be
because it's in
thriller,
space.
or so, like it was a kind of psychological thriller.
Right.
And I was kind of like, well, I was a bit, well,
that's actually, Gone Home did that as well, where it sort of seemed like a horror game for a...
Which is in Gone Home.
Yeah. In Tacoma, you mean.
And yeah, also there.
I loved I loved that tweet about the Gone Home original soundtrack, which was like, see, there is a ghost in Tacoma.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, like, so I'd love to play something like Tacoma that was...
In Gone Home, sorry.
Yeah. That was multiplayer.
What?
Bear with me. Because, so I was just thinking about this because I think it's really fascinating and it's really interesting because as someone who used to work in interactive theatre and immersive theatre, if you told me we're going to present those scenarios and those stories to the audience in a way where they can reverse time and see everything, I would assume that would break it and ruin the mystique. Because the kind of, some of the excitement of those shows is how imperfect your view of it is, and you come out of it and you ask your friend who you got separated from at the start, like, what did you see? And then afterwards in the pub that you figure out what actually happened because you saw this character at a time when the other person didn't saw him. And I'd love to see a game do that to some extent. And I think they do, because I think they do that sort of passively with people. And I think inevitably, like I said, people are going to encounter aspects of Tacoma differently from each other and piece it together. And that maybe is a kind of passive multiplayer or kind of, metagame multiplayer or something like that. But it's interesting because what I'm saying is it doesn't spoil it being able to rewind and rewatch and kind of mine it for narrative. It actually doesn't. And that sort of, I have no broader point there other than that's sort of contrary to my
Well, I think part
instincts.
of that is because if you're doing something with interactive theatre, you either have to, like, lose the characters for a while, like, have them step out of view and then present a different timeline. Because what Tacoma does is that the recordings that you get they're imperfect. They're also from all over the place time-wise. Like, one will be from 3 months ago, one will be from a couple of days ago.
That's true, yeah.
Like, all of that stuff. So you're sort of trying to work with that. And they're such short snippets, and that you have to pair them with the written documentation, or even just things that you find in the environmental storytelling, to actually figure anything out. So it's still the sense of having absolutely imperfect information, and the fact that time is finite, so you end up, maybe missing a few things, or, just choosing to move on, or, thinking, do you know what, I'm going to, like, not pick around this person's private life in that way. And so I think you still end up with a sort of, this is the bare bones of what has happened, and then the amount of flesh that you can put onto that and the amount of extrapolation you can do or want to do is then up to you. So you're kind of having the conversation that you would have down the pub with your friend in your own head because of how it fragments everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you definitely couldn't easily do that in a...
No, because if you're following someone from room to room, or you have to, like, really signpost that it's a completely different time zone in this room, or, like, it would be a very complicated undertaking, I guess.
Yeah. Certainly not as elegant.
I think having these, like the sort of the group scenes that you go into and have to rewind and unpick, they're almost like this knot, and you kind of pick at these threads. And as you follow people back into their rooms, I think it gives you a really good sense of their individual characters and their kind of personhood in a way that I've not really experienced in other game storytelling techniques. And it reminded me of the film Time Code, which is, I think it's called Time Code, where the film is segmented into 4 blocks, and the entire film happens in real time, and it's pretty much one shot, I think, when it was executed.
Events occur in real time.
And it's kind of a thriller, and it's a very interesting experiment, but it fails because the characters are forced to stop doing things so that you can concentrate on another quarter of the screen.
Yeah.
So you'll get a bit where, like, 2 people have an argument, and then one of them will just have to brood furiously for 3 minutes while the person who had the argument goes and does something else, which is what you're supposed to be watching. And you're not actually watching characters at that point. You're watching the kind of god author, like, move these pawns around.
Yeah, and they have to pick which one you should be watching, because they have to pick which one you get the sound from. Right?
Exactly, yeah. Whereas this feels like a really elegant way of doing that, right? Actually giving you the ability to go back through the storyline and follow people back through different rooms.
Yeah.
It's really, really effective. Yeah, it's great.
I have had bits where, only momentary, but, like, I'm trying to listen to a conversation and other people walk in and they're having a conversation and it overlaps with the conversation I'm trying to listen to, and I can't hear it anymore, and I have to, like, figure out where to stand that conversation gets filtered out and this one still plays.
Yeah, that's interesting. It feels very naturalistic when that happens. It feels sort of like, and you know something about that conversation when someone walks in talking to the ship AI, and you now know why they say the thing they say when they walk into the room. And
and I actually had much worse problems with audibility in Prey, which just has a very traditional audio diary system, but doesn't do a good job of, like, pausing them when people are talking to you in real life, and those things just clash, like, hugely, and really cause me problems.
Yeah, it makes to be honest, it's a really interesting comparison in like 2017's best fully realized space stations in games where a story happens.
I actually kind of thought when I played Prey, because the environmental, or like reading emails in that game was so good, and the way it had that list of crew that you could go through, it was such a great experience exploring that place and learning about the people there. I actually kind of wondered if the Fulbright people were playing that and thinking, oh shit, I've got some competition here.
Yeah, they are very different. Although, to be honest, I would happily receive like either story in that mode. Like, it's interesting. Like, I would happily have seen Tacoma's mechanics used to tell Prey's story with none of Prey's like, system shockness attached to it. Like, it would also have worked. Actually, no, I think so. Yeah, I'll clarify that. Tacoma's mechanics would work for telling you the story. Prey's mechanics would not work for telling you the story.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to turn into a cup and just roll through this conversation about how our relationship's going to pan out.
That could be amazing.
Now that you say it.
But yeah. No, it's good.
Yeah, I think Tacoma is way better at audio diaries because it does something different to audio diaries and something that works much better. To be honest, I think just putting them so, even if they were audio only, putting them so front and center and having a really good interface for scrubbing back and forth and telling you where the important stuff is, that in itself is a big deal. But I think I prefer Prey for reading emails because the way that was in world and so seamless just made me really keen to like dive into each one.
So the only thing that I think has been a little source of friction for me in Tacoma so far is I'm playing on a really big monitor. And because it tends to, it's a lovely interface. You sort of pull, basically what you're seeing when you access someone else's heads-up display is almost like the tabs they have open at the time is kind of the impression. And they kind of fling out to sort of the corners of the screen, which I found sort of like not, you get used to it, but they're quite zoomed in, even at sort of max res.
Yeah.
Like they're really close to you, as if they were in your eyes, which is what they're supposed to be.
And then you also have the option to zoom in on them, which seems like, whoa.
And so I found it a little bit sort of like almost everything that occupies the screen real estate, and this is such a dry thing to say about such a kind of well-conceived game, would have been like more pleasant to just read through, were it like occupying 2/3 of the center of the screen space.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like just from a pure UI friendliness point of view, like moving things close to the center of the screen, basically.
I think that's a concession to the consoles, because it's out on consoles as well.
Like TV readability.
Playing on a telly that's like perhaps 10, 15 feet away from you.
Yeah.
I do find though, I'm playing on PC with a gamepad and I end up just switching to mouse for those sections because controlling that with a gamepad, it works, but it's much more cumbersome than a mouse.
It's interesting because it is totally in comparison. I've never made any other context, but I've been playing a bit of Warframe this week, which I'm not going to talk about in any more detail.
Warframe versus Tacoma, which is the better?
Well, so weirdly, I'm writing something about Warframe for Eurogamer, and but the one thing that I've butted up against, having never played the game before, is that game makes me feel powerfully sick. And I don't get sick, like, from third-person games, I don't get sick from first-person games. I barely get sick from VR. I'm one of the lucky people who can mostly do VR. Like, first couple of hours of Warframe, like, had to go to bed immediately.
Oh my God.
Just, like, given that it's,
You thought I was overreacting when I said...
No, I just was like, well, it made you feel seasick, that's weird. And so I then tried playing it on PlayStation. And I didn't get on.
It makes me feel so headachy and so sick. I can't play it on PC.
And I fixed it now, mostly. I can play it in short bursts. Like speaking hazard pay for this, really. Like I can play it in short bursts, and a lot of that required because one of the problems is it has very small text that it is thrown to the sides of the screen, and then it fixes that stuff to like motion bob and things like the UI attached to your head, which is exactly the mechanic from Tacoma, which is why I bring it up. And what I've discovered is, that makes you feel really, really, really ill. Tacoma doesn't have this problem because it fills your vision with it and you only ever experience it like you load it and it's like a static screen in front of you. Warframe is essentially what that UI would be like to actually have. You know, when you see characters walking around, it's sort of in front of them as they're walking around. And you know, I mean, unless this is where Tacoma's going with all of this, like, you just throw up constantly as far as I can tell. So, the way I fixed it in Warframe was by disabling basically making the UI static is an option, thankfully, so that it doesn't move. And basically telling it that my monitor's a lot smaller than it is, not resolution, but it allows you to, like, define the boundaries of your screen for rendering the UI and just shrinking that. So it's like half the size of my actual monitor and it forces it to draw the UI closer to the center of the screen. Suddenly means I don't feel sick anymore. And it was just an interesting kind of like, weird to encounter that in two completely different contexts this week. But like,
Yeah.
and Tacoma doesn't have the same problem because things are so big, and when you're concentrating on them, you're only concentrating on them. You're not controlling a coral fetish ninja.
Yeah, the
coral
aspect of the
fetish
game is,
ninja?
They look sort of, all Warframe characters look like they're made of like H.R. Geigerian kind of organic growths, like coral. Yeah.
very odd.
They're very bony
It depends on the Warframe you're using, right?
to some extent, but they're all very kind of like, you know, scribbly. They're gribbly.
Are they? Do you mean the Grineer?
No, they're all gribbly. Everyone's gribbly in Warframe.
Because the Grineer look like Maggie Smith in a bonnet
They
sometimes.
do, yeah. Grenade look like yeah.
That sounds
Gribbliest
brilliant.
of all.
I would play Maggie Smith in any online shooter.
I know, I wish they'd gone full on with it.
Should always go full Smith.
Full Maggie Smith in a bonnet.
But like that, yeah. Most of the Warframes are extremely like bony, gribble men and women with like spindly arms and like
Well,
bumps
okay,
and masks
I'm
and-
going to agree to disagree, because I don't think that that's fair or true.
Well, look at I would be amazed if you didn't agree with that. That seems like a weird thing not to. I mean, you've seen Warframe characters, right? They're extremely gribbly. Would you
Yeah,
not agree?
they're kind of like, some of them are smoother than others, but they tend to be like organic shapes, and they're
Yeah.
not like Space Marines in the traditional mold.
No, not at all.
Do you know, I don't think I have a separate category in my brain for Warframe versus Warface.
No, they're very, very different games.
I haven't played either, and they've all just been in my dim peripheral knowledge.
Yeah, free to play games.
And
Yeah,
they start with Warf.
I should add that I've not played Warframe. I've only ever seen videos of it.
it's all right.
I've played it a little bit of it.
So,
didn't like
It
it.
had a reputation for being the console thing that you would play because Destiny wasn't on PC. Rather, you know, the PC thing that people who, like frustrated Destiny players would play.
Play Warframe.
But obviously now Destiny 2 is coming to PC. I think they've had to like up their game, and they've made a
their
bunch
coral.
of changes, and like they've now got like dynamic like day and night cycles on these like
gonna say
expansive
dynamic
worlds
bonnets.
that they're now.
They've got like an open world section they're adding as well. And
Yeah,
stuff
like
that.
like that's the whole focus of the new thing, and they're
Yeah.
like giving like graphical updates to like a whole bunch of
Yeah.
stuff. So it's like it's very kind of aware.
The White Walkers are coming.
absolutely nothing like Tacoma. It would.
And yet, we found
Does
a way.
anyone know what happened to the... Was it Ghost Recon Online?
Oh,
Yes.
Free to play.
So,
That was all right.
It's really weird that you mentioned that because I was at the studio that developed it last week.
Oh, wow.
That was a cool game, actually.
That's a hell of a fucking segue.
I think because like the place that Warframe and Warface occupy in my brain is games that I haven't played, but I think might be a bit like Ghost Recon Online, which I did play.
So
That was
Warframe
like-
is
oh, no,
very
it was
sort of fantasy slashy kind of third person running around.
sci-fi
okay.
coral people game.
Yeah,
Whereas
quite different.
Warface is like more traditional military shootery.
Is that Crytek's thing?
Okay, so maybe
Yeah, Warface is Crytek's
Oh, God.
My
Yeah.
Mum Won't Buy Me COD game.
is it free to play?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think they really push it in like, especially in Russia and China.
Yeah,
and
it's huge in
places.
Russia and China. Which is where I was last week. Amazing.
Wow,
This-
so many segues to
Yeah.
your trip.
No, but it's weird that you mentioned Ghost Recon Phantoms or Ghost Recon Online because, I was at Ubisoft Singapore last week. That's why I was on the pod last week, talking to them about free to play. And then I went to China for China Joy, which is China's Gamescom, except it's like two Gamescoms and it's fucking massive and it's 38 degrees and the aircon's barely holding it together, which is predominantly free to play games because that's the only kind of games that there are, in the future or Asia, which future. Yeah, it was interesting because there's definitely people, we can segue off Tacoma into that, right?
Yep.
Because it was a really interesting trip because it made me, I had loads of thoughts about how the games industry feels different in different parts of the world. But the thing that really struck me is that the sort of the absolute necessity of free to play, and the absolute, so in China Joy is the same size as Gamescom. I think on paper it feels a lot bigger. I think one of the reasons it feels a lot bigger is because it's just free to play mobile games.
Were you a lot smaller? Like, that would also explain it.
That would also explain it. But no, I think I
Tiny
just,
borrower Chris.
yeah,
There's a little press tag.
I employed the tiny drone me. No, I
Like,
was.
did you check? When
I
you
didn't. No,
got
you've
there?
blown my mind. But no, because you know you go
worst
there,
jet
you
lag
like you sort of looking around. It looks like sort of E3 show floor kind of setup, but across like 10 hangars.
Blimey.
It's massive, and you realize like what aren't I seeing? And you're like, oh, I can't see any single player games in this 140,000 square meter venue.
Blimey.
There isn't one. Like,
It's giving me the sweats
At
just
all.
thinking about this.
I'm not joking.
Yeah.
There isn't one.
Oh my god.
And there are basically no games here that anyone will buy outside of certain booths. Outside of the one hall given over to Western developers, which is the quieter hall. There's nothing. Like, all of the developers that are there with an audience tailored, with a game tailored to the Chinese audience have a multiplayer game. They have a free-to-play game. Or a mobile game, or both. Or all three. And, you know, it was kind of eye-opening. Like, I don't necessarily think every trend everywhere is necessarily going to go to one place. I think, you know, regional tastes are absolutely a thing. And I think there are reasons why the games industry has grown in the ways it has, in the ways that it has, in the places where it has. But it made me, I think the most important thing is it made me recontextualize everything I think I know about the decisions that publishers in Europe and America make about the games that they publish. Because I hadn't really considered, oh shit, Chinese market is absolutely massive. The Southeast Asian market is growing extremely quickly. And, you know, you wonder like, so guess what Bethesda game was there? What was the one Bethesda game at China Joy?
The card game.
No.
What Bethesda games are there?
Was it?
Was it old Elder Scrolls Online?
No.
Oh, I was about to
Because
guess
that's
like a
free,
free-to-play
isn't it?
version.
That is free to play now.
I think so. Nope.
Was it Arx Fatalis?
No, although I did find out an interesting. So bonus interesting. So I was out with Ubisoft because I was visiting their Shanghai studio and their Singapore studio. Did you know that Dark Messiah and Magic, as in Arcane, was Arx Fatalis 2? And then when Ubisoft
Really?
agreed to publish it, it became a Magic game.
Oh, right.
There you go.
Transported it to a different universe.
What other
is-
games
I found that
are
out
there?
at 2 a.m. from a man who works for Ubisoft.
That's fascinating.
Like, give us
It
three.
was Fallout Shelter.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah.
of course.
Oh, right.
I was thinking, did Fallout have a match 3 game?
Close enough. Like,
Yeah.
and that was what's so fascinating about it. It was this, like, you're like, oh, hang on, that's, like, I think it you know, arrogantly, you can arrogantly assume that, like, if something doesn't fit into the kind of trends and popularities that we understand, or something's written off as kind of like a free-to-play game nobody likes.
I don't know. I had friends who were super into it. Like,
Fallout Shelter is a bad example, but
but I knew one person who had to delete it off her phone because it was just like, I cannot trust myself with this game anymore.
yeah. And it's interesting, like, watching, like, oh, hang on, this is where it makes sense. Like, this is where it fits in. This is where it is the thing that gets you into this
Yeah.
market. Like,
There's an amazing story on Idle Thumbs. Chris Reamer played Fallout Shelter a lot, and there's a population cap in it, it turns out. And it doesn't stop people getting pregnant. It just stops them giving birth.
Oh, God.
And so he ended up with like a shelter
Do they
full
get
of
backed up?
pregnant women who couldn't give birth because it would exceed the population cap. And so he had to go out and like kill people to make way for the births.
Isn't there a myth in like Greek or Roman mythology where somebody was pregnant and then another person like bribed the goddess of childbirth to just not let her give birth?
Oh God.
I can't remember who that was, and then someone had to distract her so that she could actually have the baby. It might have been Hercules. Might have been. I can't remember. I will look that up.
Very early draft of the Handmaid's Tale.
but yeah, like, so that was one side of it, was that, like, okay, well, if you have an audience where this is just how games are, then this is just how, and which is not to say that, actually that, the audience is exclusively interested in those games, because they're not. It's that the kinds of games that can be officially published tend to fit into those categories, and there are a bunch of really interesting social and business reasons for that, to do with who has monopolies. The rules on publishing in China are very, very restrictive. However, grey market is very, very, very present. So you end up in weird situations where Ubisoft at their booth are advertising Assassin's Creed Origins, a game that will never be published in China officially. It can't. It breaks every single censorship rule all Assassin's Creed games do. Yeah, Assassin's Creed has a really big following in China. So they're going to do a mobile game that has none of those things in it. like a mobile MMO RPG thing with none of the kind of social because the strictures on the censorship is so tight. And
did you learn anything about how when free-to-play is the norm, what things tend to elevate people to consumer awareness? So, for example, you know, in the UK, it would just be a case of like, okay, we've got an incredibly crowded mobile market where people are really reluctant to pay anything, and certainly more than £1 for an app. So, like, you know, you look at ways that people are sort of trying to get heard, whether that's like, you know, particular review sites, or whether that's just being featured on the App Store, or leveraging particular connections, or, you know, having particular celebrities talk about their game. But, like, is there a sort of a commensurate thing in the Chinese market for PC games?
So it's interesting because maybe not for PC games. So Steam's in a really weird position where Steam is basically allowed to is almost like a sanctioned black market in China. Like, it's allowed to sell anything, for now. A few games are actually officially sanctioned by the Chinese government. Most aren't. But you can buy anything. You can't play it online necessarily without a VPN, but you could, if it's a single player game, you could buy it.
And there's the Chinese version of Dota that has some of the heroes, like, models.
So there are, like, the way to understand it is there are sort of tiers of availability in China, but the bottom being completely unapproved grey market. You can get it if you can get it from Hong Kong, kind of thing. And then the tier above that is like sort of published in reduced form with a partner, and then the tier above that is it's been adapted for the Chinese market, which will mean like removing all the skeletons in Dota's case. And then the tier above that is having catering specifically to the Chinese market in some ways, like offering Chinese New Year's events, which is why you see a lot of them in games now. And the tier above that is offering things exclusively to the Chinese market, which Dota does hit, but Counter-Strike Go doesn't, and Counter-Strike is moving up in that particular way. Like, Valve are doing a specific version of Counter-Strike for China now.
Yeah.
Didn't Eve have a Chinese server?
It had a
that
Chinese-
was
Yeah.
siloed off, and then they merged them.
Yeah, it had a Chinese server.
Because that was the first time that Eve had ever, you know, there'd ever been a separate world in Eve, because their whole thing was everyone's in one world.
And that's because running an online service in China is subject to the same restrictions
Yeah.
and laws. So you'd have to connect with the VPN otherwise. And that's just been cracked down on last week. So,
You had trouble just even like getting on the internet out there, right?
yeah. I mean, you can't access Google, you can't access Facebook. And the reasoning for that is actually really interesting, because it's not, I mean, there are, I could go on about this because it was a really, like, it was a very intense week, and a very informative week at a meeting with the Chinese government to speak about exactly this. So, like, you know, I've got a lot of this information in my brain now, and a lot of it's going to go into written work and so on. But, it's interesting. Like, there are so many points that you wouldn't necessarily recall from, but there are points where you sort of understand it. And actually, the absence of Google and Facebook is an interesting one, because it's a developing economy. It's a developing digital economy in some ways. It's a huge digital economy in a lot of ways. The absence of Google and Facebook and so on, for the amount of time that stuff has been gone, has allowed Tencent to become what it is, which is a reasonably, you have to consider it a competitor and equal to those companies. And that would never have happened had the competition and their monopoly just be kept away from that economy. So that I don't know, China's actually been getting stricter over the last 10 years. So I don't necessarily want to say that the future is walls come down and things merge, because it might not be that way. But if they did, like if China just opened up to foreign business tomorrow, they would have a powerful, homegrown, domestic kind of digital business.
It's interesting keeping track of what Tencent are investing in as well, because they have, obviously there's Riot, they invest in Hi-Res. I think they've just picked up a share in Milky Tea, haven't they? Who make coffin dodgers. And I was like, okay, sure. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things that that is coming up more and more now.
Yeah, it was a big deal when Blizzard made a deal with Tencent. Is World of Warcraft published through Tencent?
NetEase.
NetEase, okay.
Yeah, that's through NetEase. And they co-own a company.
Gotcha.
So, interestingly, weirdly, I now know loads about Chinese business law. Basically, so you either agree to have your game published entirely by a Chinese partner, or typically now you co-own. So Valve work through Perfect World, Blizzard work through NetEase, or you've co-found a company in China with a Chinese partner. Right. That's the right to do that. That's what Blizzard did. Blizzard are kind of quite far ahead of the game. Ubisoft are weirdly further ahead than everybody else because they were the first games company in China, including Chinese companies. They incorporated in Shanghai 20 years ago, before Tencent even existed.
Wow.
So they got ahead of the curve and now have an incorporated Chinese brand that can do that stuff.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing about China that shapes a lot of this is that consoles were banned for 15 years, from 2000 to 2015. So you can't, so a lot of the tastes and things, like particularly for kind of like AAA action game single player stuff that you might think about, you have to frame in that light. It's not purely like some kind of, theme of trend. It is a kind of enforced thing as well, that like the games that were available to people were PC or mobile, and that trended towards free to play and MMOs and RPGs and MOBAs and things quicker necessarily. But yeah, really super interesting kind of.
That's fascinating.
The other thing that I wanted to mention actually from it, was, I don't necessarily think we need to be worried about VR as a business. I don't think we need to be
worried about it in what sense?
As in, is it going to go away? Has it been a flop? Because it's huge in Asia. Like, and you see it implemented in much more interesting, more practical ways. So, a lot of booths had demo units for things that will eventually be installed in like shopping malls and cinemas. So like VR experiences that you sit in and the headset is on a cable that you pull out of a seat rest or something like that and you put it on, you have the VR experience for a bit and then you go about your day basically. Loads and loads and loads of booths used VR for marketing purposes. So like you'd have a game, like a free-to-play mobile game or a free-to-play card game or something, but it would be attached, they would have like an attached VR experience set in the same franchise.
Yeah.
So, thing one, future of VR is marketing, basically. Like, marketing for other things.
Like nothing else in terms of like, it blocks out the noise of a noisy show floor, right?
Yeah.
Like if you could get somebody at Rezzed or at the PC Gamer weekend or something and jam a headset on them so that they don't hear your rival the next, booth over, like saying, hey, buy our thing instead, then,
yeah,
it's automatically a more streamlined, more focused experience.
Yeah, totally. But it recontextualized it in a kind of like, we've been thinking of everything from a kind of, will you buy this, have it in your home?
Yeah.
And then buy software for it kind of point of view. And actually, if you think of it those ways, it makes a lot more sense. And it's a lot more kind of, believable as a thing. The other thing was that, was esports. Like, again, exactly the same thing. Esports. It's a marketing tool. The thing that stood out about China Joy relative to E3 or Gamescom was that every single booth, and the booths are massive, has a stage attached to it. And the job of the stage is to draw people to the booth, basically. And like, that was everything from like a BMX show to rapping, lots of dancing, lots of Just Dance actually, like Just Dance shows and things, like competitions on stage, loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of models. Like that was one of the biggest differences, I think, or one of the ways that it feels like E3 and Gamescom have changed quite a lot, and China Joy still feels like from a previous era in that regard.
The concept of booth babes is kind of gradually phased out.
It was really interesting. It was really interesting being in a meeting where this came up with officials who would be responsible for judging these things, and one of the things that they say that they are very keen to weed out of games and censor games for is erotic content and sexually provocative content. And yet what was really interesting was that the show was far more about putting women in dresses in front of people than what are now self-regulating shows elsewhere, but also a lot of the games themselves have much more sexually explicit presentation and advertising, and also a lot of the Western games going to China. Like I saw Torchlight over there, which I think is published by Tencent in China. Might even be a free-to-play thing in Torchlight 2, which you think of as kind of like cutesy, kind of chunky, kind of characterful art. Like I think the mascot for Torchlight in America and Europe isn't it the lady with the red hair and the torch? Like she's carrying a torch and like has the dog. But I
can't remember now.
But she's wearing like overalls and a thing. In China, it's a woman in a corset in a kind of backbreaking League of Legends pose and like boobs pulling out. And obviously someone from the Torchlight team has to have approved that and made it specifically for that audience. And that was just an observation. Like it's more that, censorship seems to be ironically pushing in the opposite direction to the way everything else is actually going. But on all those stages, among one of the seemingly interchangeable with all those different forms of like stage entertainment was esports. It was like have people playing a tournament for your esports presentation style tournament for your mobile racing game, for your tanks game, for your RPG, for whatever. And it was interesting because it's not to say that esports is always marketing, but it felt like, this feels like the pragmatic implementation of this thing.
But is it technically esports, or is that more in the vein of having a live action rendition of when somebody does the advert of the multiplayer thing where it's everybody on a couch shouting and having fun and drawing attention to the thing? So you just pay a bunch of people to essentially reenact that to draw attention and make the game look really social.
The full spectrum. There was the full spectrum. So there was the full spectrum because Intel Extreme Masters was there, which is legit esports. Yeah. There was and then it went all the way down to what you're saying, which is the kind of like for show esports things. And then in the middle were like legit esports tournaments that had been like heavily sponsored by a publisher to be attached to their booth to advertise their game, even if they weren't fully related. And that was sort of felt like the middle zone where it was like fundamentally a sales exercise, but it still had the kind of legit competition or real teams or whatever.
You do see a few of those at Gamescom and places like that when you go along and they've set up like a stage and they've set up like rows of seating.
Yeah.
Where there's a small smattering of people who want to know what's going on, but they've done that. They've tried to create a little mini esports arena, even for something that no one cares about, no one has ever heard about. So that does feel like that does exist. It doesn't seem to be especially effective in the conferences I've been to, at least.
No.
But it does sort of, it just creates a spectacle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But no, what I'm getting at in terms of but is it really an esport thing is like, not to open a stupid conversation that just is annoying. It's more just to say, are you talking about games that actually have a legit organic esports scene that is sustained and has seasons and it's a, or some other actual structure or longevity? Or do you just mean that there was a competition with money attached?
I think I'm talking about the presentation of it. I think I'm talking about what it means. So the weakness of esports is that no one really agrees or understands what they are.
Right.
Like you set your stall out at a particular point, and if you work in the industry, you probably set it out exactly the same terms you just did. But God knows, from the outside, people just think of esports as kind of an entertainment. As an entity, an entertainment entity that you need to kind of have that you bolt on. And this was the purest. And I've always, as someone who's run a channel, I've always rejected that, and I've always wanted to promote esports as a specific thing that has, I suppose what I'm saying is this is the first time I've seen esports deployed with a heavy brush in terms of just the way it looks, completely superficially, in a way that expressed the same attitude that you see expressed by people who just go we'll just add some esports to this, right?
I guess I'm just sort of seeing it as a live action version of literally all of the press releases I get that say, we're holding a launch tournament for $40,000 for our completely random game that you probably won't write about otherwise.
Yeah, sure. And that stuff doesn't necessarily work or is appealing over here, but it was interesting to watch it draw crowds, to watch it function, to watch it work, to watch it be successful as advertising.
So there were crowds?
Yeah.
Okay.
People were gathering to watch this. It was one of the marketing tools that worked alongside dance competitions and, giveaways.
Right.
And that was interesting to see because I previously wouldn't have assumed. A lot of this trip was me seeing things that I previously assumed wouldn't work. And understanding that things work differently in different markets and in different contexts. That there's a reason that those trends exist over here. Finding the source of them. Hang on.
Yeah, that's why you're trying that.
This is why you're trying this. Even if it's not working, this is why you're trying it, because this is something that's been proven to work elsewhere.
Well, I mean, also, it just doesn't work on us specifically, but if there's $40,000 at stake for a thing, and if you're a person who has a bit of time on their hands and might legitimately get good at that game, then, you would want to know about it and you would want to get involved and you maybe would want 4 other friends to pick it up so that you had a chance at... Do you know what I mean? that's the sort of thing where maybe it's not actually aimed at us specifically. We just get the press release because they have lists that they send these things to. But also, like, I guess I'm struggling to pick up from what you're saying whether these are games that do also have a niche following and that people would have come to China Joy to actually see that specific thing, or whether it was that they were just sort of responding to esports as a marketing tool. Like, whether you're just drifting through the hall and you're like, that looks like a fun thing, and you go over and watch.
That enough is hard to pass because, I'm not familiar with a lot of the games and so on, but there was definitely it was interesting watching it appear interchangeable with other forms of marketing. That I guess is the point, right? Not to say that all esports is that, but yeah, maybe second guess the things I would instinctively dismiss as bad ideas.
I've after all this time just remembered some news. Do we want to get into it?
Yeah.
What's the news?
Let's get into the news.
Guild Wars 2 is getting its second expansion and its second kind of major input of new content, a whole new zone. It's getting mounts, including a bunny rabbit that can jump really high, get you to new areas.
Did it not have mounts?
Didn't have mounts? No, it's never had mounts.
Huh.
I know, right? But you've got a choice between a bunny rabbit, a manta ray a giant manta ray that hovers over the ground and over water. And
is that like those
hover tank, basically?
Those screamers, shriekers?
Screamers,
a lot like the screamers that Chris has beautifully painted
in Warhammer.
Do you like surf on them, or do you sit on them?
You sit on them, and they surf. As is
they have a
the role of,
surfboard.
commandeered animals. They are your surfboard, and they can get you across like oceans to other bits. There's an elemental jackal of some that can blink through time and space.
What? This
like
is escalated
Corvo.
really strictly.
And there's another one. Velociraptor, obviously. There's a raptor who can jump great distances, and these are all used to navigate the new Crystal Desert, I think it's called.
Wow.
And those movement abilities are used to kind of gate off areas, and as you level up, the way Guild Wars 2 works is these days with the expansions is that zones have their own like leveling curves, basically. So by being in a zone, you're acquiring new traversal techniques and new masteries that help you specifically with that zone. So with the desert, the form that's taking now is with mounts that you discover and upgrade. And all of the classes have new elite masteries, which basically change their roles completely and give you new skill trees and new things to do. And it looks bloody great. That's a game that's just quietly ticking on, still being brilliant. It's
they've had their seasons of content, haven't they? They've had like their seasonal like stories that like it's almost like soap operas, don't they? Yeah.
Those are continuing actually, and the latest phase is due to kick off shortly after the expansion is released. And they've used this really well to like sort of flesh out the villains of the world and deliver their stories and stuff. The new expansion is about a god of fire who's gone rogue, which is a pretty standard MMO fare, to be honest. But I still think it's really exciting, and it's still worth mentioning this game because it's an MMO where you don't pay a subscription. Just buy the game once, and you get so much stuff now. Like there's so much stuff in that game.
I was just going to say, when you mentioned about the cool mounts, it made me think of Path of Exile, which has its, is it Fall of Oriath, or it's something of Oriath, is the expansion of it coming out this
That Oriath's
weekend.
always falling or rising, or some damn thing.
And I keep getting, like, messages about it, I keep getting, like, news feed updates about it, but, like, I remember when I first looked into that game, and it has the most New Zealand pets of all the pets. That's what, like, I was looking at the things, I was like, this is such a New Zealand game. These people are from New Zealand. I bet they're from New Zealand. And they have like things like a Weta and like a Gore version of it, which is essentially like this giant like grasshopper like thing, and the Gore version just trails blood everywhere, like it's hemorrhaging.
Is that what Weta Digital are named after?
I don't know.
That's a New Zealand based CGI
so,
company.
Yes. But like it's just things like that. You're going, yep. Excellent work. So good.
I watched, I haven't played Guild Wars 2 in a long, long time, but I was interested by this announcement, and so I watched like, someone just said, oh my god, this new expansion is great, and then they linked to the live stream, and of course the live stream had just finished, and that meant I couldn't watch that, and also the actual trailer was not up yet. But then when I eventually did get a trailer I could watch, it was 22 minutes long.
Oh yeah.
And I was
know
like,
the one you mean.
well, I don't want to watch 22 minutes of this. I want kind of a summary. And so I started watching it from the start. That was a bad idea because the start is lore. The first 10 to 15 minutes, I would say, is lore.
God.
And,
Yes.
I don't have any memories of what I thought of Guild Wars lore at the time, but this sure seemed boring. It was very
The
traditional.
concept art's amazing.
Yeah, that's what I love about Guild
Always
Wars. As soon as you show me like the new place, I'm like, oh my god, look at that. And then actually I skipped ahead and I just ended up listening to, watching all of the elite specializations,
Yeah.
which I don't even know what that is. I didn't
They're
play
really
far
cool.
enough to know what that means. But basically, it seemed like a new way of playing an existing class. So like now the elementalist can use swords in their main hand and something else in their secondary hand. But there's also a special set of skills that go along with this. And they're all kind of desert themed. So the Mesmer, I've already forgotten what it's called. Elite specialization for the desert is Mirage. And so they're all about like,
Pretending to be a body of water
Yeah.
slightly further away.
You think I'm a lake, but I'm not. I'm just a bunch more sand. No, it's all about like them appearing not to be there when they really are and attacking from multiple angles and all that
Isn't
stuff.
that the opposite of a mirage?
Attacking from all
Not
angles.
to be there when
Well,
they're
I
not.
mean,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
not
you're
being
right.
there.
There's water everywhere.
Yeah, you're correct. Unless the way they appear to not be there is they look like a lake.
Yeah, no, this is all very confusing. Also, on that like trailer length thing, I resent any trailer that takes me longer to watch than the news takes me to write. I'm just sat there like, no, because I will write the summary of this so much quicker than this will take me to actually
They were very keen to
sit
tell me about
through.
Balthazar and
Oh.
how mysterious it was that he wanted to, I don't know, come back and he betrayed his own followers and all this other stuff. I was like, I really don't
I'm
get
in.
They do have a new, I wasn't 100% confident in my interpretation of their lore, because they were talking about a new god and everything on screen was a picture of a really cute dragon. Like a baby dragon, like, if you've seen How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Oh, he's
and
the
it was
best.
adorable. But I didn't know if that was the gods they were talking about or whether I'm just also seeing a baby dragon unrelatedly.
No, because the gods in Guild Wars are dragons. So.
Okay.
Apparently they're different things now. Apparently let's not get into it.
No, Tom. Let's get into it.
God.
Yeah, the dragons are these elemental forces that control the world, and that the world is essentially theirs. But apparently there are human gods as well now. But I mean, I've not been following it closely, and Balthazar is one of those.
Yeah, I heard the
Turned
human
away
gods
from-
went away and Balthazar's like the first to return or something.
Oh, yeah, that is a thing.
He's kind of he's reawoken and he's not happy.
I regret knowing as much as I do.
But now you know everything, Tom. It's clearly sunk in, so the trailer has done its work.
I tried to sneak back into Guild Wars a few months ago because when I first got it, it was actually a present from Chris. But like him and everybody else who I knew who had played it were doing that thing of like having played it, got really good at it, basically mined it out, and then wanting to like show you around, but not really show you around because they want to show you all of the things that they're interested in and none of the things you're interested in.
I'm right here.
It was really sweet because you were so enthusiastic, but it was very much, come over here, look at this thing. And I'm like, I don't know what the button for moving is. And it was, you know, so there was just a certain amount of, we did a whistle stop tour and it was overwhelming. And then I wanted to stop, like when I went into World of Warcraft and a friend of mine scooped me up into his like motorcycle sidecart, drove me to a place where I couldn't possibly survive, showed me everything from, I don't know, like the end game, and then dropped me back off at like the start area where I had to talk to fucking Hogger about some nonsense. And I'm just
Why
like,
can't you talk to the Hogger?
anyway.
Does Guild Wars 2 do any kind of, so my favorite innovation in MMO design ever was City of Heroes sidekicking system, where if you're a high level character showing a new character around, you can just bump them up to your level.
Guild Wars does it automatically.
Yeah, it's really
Okay.
good. Yeah.
Like you are
you
level
can-
to the zone you're in.
Right.
So you can be higher level than somebody, but not higher than the zone's cap. So everything will always be a challenge, and the loot scales.
nice.
So, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it's great. It's the reason it's the highest score I've ever given a game. Was Guild Wars 2.
But I think, because didn't they switch over to like maybe a new system?
I don't know.
Or something, because when I tried to log in, it wouldn't let me because it didn't recognise my account because they'd switched systems or something. So I had to email the support person, and then they sent me a link that I could use to reset my account, and I was like, oh, that's cool, I'll use that when I've next got time to play the game. And then when I'd next got time to play the game, it was like, your link has expired, you will need to do this all over again. So I've got like a chat with their customer service department at some point in the future.
Actually, barely relatedly, didn't the Secret World sort of relaunch recently as a free-to-play thing? And I was listening to the Video Games Hot Dog podcast, and Zach was saying that I always heard a lot of good stuff about the Secret World, but with a lot of caveats. It was always like, oh, it's really good at this, but you probably shouldn't play it because of this. And apparently, if you now, like, the first zone is supposed to be really, really good, just like a brilliant MMO. I don't know, whatever the fuck is good about MMOs. It's got all of that. And now you can play it for free, and all the leveling is way faster, and all the kind of problems with that it had at launch are kind of fixed just through them kind of scrapping systems that didn't work, or, you know, taking a sledgehammer to the whole thing and being ruthless about it. And it's very like generous and quick to level up to.
I didn't mean to sound mean. It's just that you can't forget everything that you know about a game.
That's true.
When you play it with someone who doesn't know anything, and so there's always tension.
That's fine.
We should stop thinking of new newses. Otherwise the podcast will not end.
Yes. Should we do questions?
Yeah.
We've got a lot.
We've got a lot of questions. We've got a lot of questions.
It's episode 200. We got a...
You know,
Go big.
owner of this MP3 file / viewer of this YouTube video, how long this episode is. We don't yet. We got a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions. And it's taken us so long to read through all the questions that we're a lot drunker now than we were mere seconds ago from your perspective. This is a lot like
Oh, good Lord.
high concept sci-fi film.
I feel like we should recap on the podcast's cocktail, which is...
Oh, yeah. We didn't mention we were drinking the crowbarb and custard, which is Corsten's apple juice with rhubarb mixed with Captain Morgan's spiced rum. And the Captain Morgan's has a vanilla in it, which kind of gives it the custard element. And then the rhubarb of the apple juice, obviously, gives it the rhubarb element, and that makes it taste like a rhubarb and custard sweet, which is amazing. And we've drunk more or less all of that now.
Yeah, there's a litre of Captain Morgan's that doesn't exist anymore. And
then we also have ginger beer and other stuff for Dark and Stormies, which is rum and ginger beer. And
the dregs of another bottle of Captain Morgan's. We should really, after 200 episodes, we should finally give Captain Morgan his due as the true 6th, 7th, or 8th member of this podcast.
We've had a few, because we also, like, Maker's Mark was our thing for a long time.
It was, yeah.
And then also there was a whiskey that I had a complete obsession with, which was, I have no idea how to pronounce it, but Abelur or Abelur,
I think.
Abelur.
Nice. Yeah.
And we drank that for a long time. And then I realised I loved Jim Beam, and that's half the price.
I think that Captain Morgan's got, like, as in the brand, has a bunch of people who dress up as Captain Morgan and attend promotional events, because I'm fairly sure that a couple of my friends have met Captain Morgan, but it hasn't been the same Captain Morgan twice.
It's like the Dread Pirate
It's like Father Christmas.
So
we went to a different place.
yep. And also like
shattered the
Andrew
illusion for me.
WK. You know?
I grew up believing that Andrew WK
Potentially.
put money under my pillow every time I lost a tooth.
For partying.
It's because you partied too hard.
Party
You know
money.
to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, every time if you get drunk and vomit, you got to put your vomit under your pillow, and Andrew WK visits you in the night and gives you money for more parties.
That's so disgusting.
That's an amazingly coherent gag.
I love Andrew WK.
Me too. We all love Andrew
He's
WK.
a genuinely great philosopher.
I think
His
so.
his agony aunt column is amazing.
Yeah, he's really smart.
Man, we could have him on the podcast.
If we could, we certainly should.
We've got so many questions. Shall we get on with it?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to have to rotate slightly. Bear with me. I'm rotating. Drew writes, has podding 200 episodes changed how you think of games? Are you enriched like a ripe mango, or husks of your former journo selves? Do tell, he bellows in all caps.
Mango or husk? Take our questionnaire now. I listened to episode 1, like I say, or a bunch of episode 1, quite recently, and I was surprised to find that it was quite lively, and also I was quite understandable. My voice was not completely indistinct, which is a problem I have sometimes in life, and that was actually bad news, because it means I have not improved in any way since then, because I would say I'm no less clear than I was back then.
I feel like
More clear.
I feel inspired a little bit by doing the podcast, because I'm amazed that I can still talk for so long about one thing.
Yeah.
You know, over the course of 4 years, over 500 hours or whatever it must be at this point.
And more broadly, like 6 years of our lives when it comes to
and it kind of
this career.
Even when sometimes like I might feel burnt out on games, like it's proof that I'm still deeply passionate and care and think about games all the time.
Yeah.
So that I'm able to come on this
Actually,
podcast every week.
Yeah, now that you mention it, this has come up a few times talking to other friends who are in the kind of games industry, talk about, like, you know, have you played anything recently? And they'll say no often. And they'll ask me, and I'll say, yeah, I have, because I do this podcast, and there's kind of like, it's not a strong pressure, but there's a little bit of an impetus to play something new each week. Like, not just to play something, but if it's the same thing, you know, more than 2 weeks running, it kind of gets a bit boring. So you should probably play something new. And this podcast just gives me an incentive to do that. And I'll push myself to do it. And that's, you know, a positive thing anyway, both, you know, for life experience is just good in general to be experiencing different things. And also as a game designer, it's really useful to not get stuck on the same games and play them endlessly, and to have a more broad perspective. And yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, totally. Like, it's, just keep ripening. Just a mango. Just
We're all
keeps
mangoes.
bigger and
ripening
greener and
forever.
more swollen, really.
Do you know about have I told the story about the Tommy
Pip's
Atkins mango?
Oh, I've always been a husk.
Professional husk.
I sometimes buy mangoes just to sort of piggyback off their juiciness, but I mean, ultimately
Thanks.
it's always
It's an
just
amazing mental image.
sliding
Riding the
back
mango into
a
the
husk.
sunset.
When people say husk, I always think of the husks from Mass Effect.
Yeah.
So
I think of like, is it like Farley's husk?
Rusks.
No, rusks. Is a rusk different to a husk?
Yes.
How
I
different?
think a baby
Well, a
chews on.
rusk is like a teething biscuit, basically.
Right, but it's dry and hollow, isn't it?
No, it's a biscuit.
Is it not? It's just a
Like, well,
biscuit.
I mean, the middle bit like disintegrates quite easily because like saliva will just turn it to pap. But
And that's the plot of Mass Effect 3.
But a husk is like
Stop
a
gumming
hollow
the husks,
sort of
Shepard.
a hollow,
That's what sovereigns used to
hollow
say.
like desiccated
I
sort
know
of
you taste
it's dried up thing.
my army of rusks.
Yeah, until today I didn't know the difference between a rusk and a husk.
Now you do.
So Farley's marketing has really not paid off.
No,
for
they
you.
haven't. They've done a poor
Just
job.
another enriching thing this podcast is giving you. Oh dear.
I think something that is like it does doing them too often or doing podcasts too often does deplete your sort of stock of things to say. So like you were saying about, you know, wanting to play new things and to sort of keep that flow of new material, like needing to do the RPS podcast on top of this has kind of been an interesting balancing act in terms of needing to keep some opinions back or like needing to have played double the volume of games in a very specific way. Like it is an interesting thing, and also like there's an interesting balancing act in terms of the amount of yourself that you bring to a thing. Like obviously, you know, you can only really talk as yourself, but there's a certain amount of like, I think podcasts, like there's a need to be approachable and a need to be sort of you, and it sort of is offset against also needing your own personal life that isn't part of a public facing thing, and it's a similar balancing act that you have to to play out on Twitter or on YouTube or in work, you know, in writing about things, like how personal you actually make it and which anecdotes you tell and which you don't. So there's some elements of games that are personal that never make it onto the podcast, or that, you know, just sort of have to be carefully curated in interesting ways, but it's hard to like explain those rather in specific terms, because obviously that negates the balancing act that you've performed, because you'd have to betray those confidences or whatever. But so that's a kind of thing that goes on behind the scenes that I think I've become so aware of in years of doing this, not on Crate and Crowbar, but on other podcasts as well. Like I used to do Not a Game and things, and so yeah.
I think I found it generally, like, particularly as other hobbies have entered my life and kind of sort of take some of the time away, doing this every week has been a reliable reminder of why I enjoy and am interested in and want to talk about video games. And also that getting pissed with your friends is fun.
That's also good.
Our next question comes from Zed, who writes, reading comments for Pyre and recalling Frozen Cortex's failure, do you think making a sports game is a mistake if you aren't, for example, EA Sports? And I wanted to tie this to another question, which comes from David, who writes, a couple of things you mentioned about Pyre. The stats for each character are displayed on their character page, shown before a match, and when clicking on the yellow window in your wagon. Hovering over a stat explains what it does and exactly what that means. Quickness in something per second, and hope in seconds before respawn. I think Pyre is remarkable in how much information they provide to the player. Tom mentioned the same command used for attack and ball throw, but as I've learned from later game AI, throwing the ball at another player so they catch it removes their aura so you can banish them, ! Brackets. I've yet to do this on purpose. I think the slow difficulty ramp up is the game's general tutorial. The Beyonder trials are advanced tutorials for specific character playstyles, so you can learn the rights at the same rate as the characters, but it seems this diegetic tutorial system has lost many people in the game. My question, how do you think a game can broadly apply unique mechanics, hover text and made up sports ball without losing players who are expecting more conventional tutorials or gameplay? Too many blobs of text tutorials make everything boring. Thanks for reading, David. For context, I've played 8 hours and read every sparkling hover text I could find. I like the game a lot, but dislike the announcer.
Yeah, I think the hover text thing was the reason that, you know, Tom S. and I had played similar amounts of Pyre, and I did know what all the stats meant, and he didn't, and it was because when I was wondering what the stats meant, it happened to be on the screen where if you hover over them, it will tell you. And I think when Tom S. was looking at what the stats meant, it was on a screen where that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's really variable. So, and what I found is that the point at which you're actually making a decision about the stat, that is not hyperlink text.
Right.
Like, that's not a pop-up text. If it's mentioned in conversation and it's in like a text box, quite right, you can mouse over it and get that information. But at the point where you're looking at an item and and the tooltip for the item says plus X, you know, this stat, that's not a hyperlink, and that's the precise moment where you need that information, and that's where you're actually going to learn what these things do.
There's a very strange thing in their economy as well, where you have these talismans, and a talisman each player can only have one talisman. You know, each person in your team can only have one talisman, and the talismans will be things like, you know, when you score a goal, it will do more damage to the enemy player, or this will make you move faster. And then you get this dust that can increase the power of those talismans. And because you can only have one, it's really just like, which type of thing do you want? And once you've decided that, how good do you want it to be? Obviously you want it to be as good as you possibly can. And the dust improves that for any type of talisman, doesn't matter what it is.
So you always buy that, right?
Yeah, and the dust is crazy cheap. I have like 96 currency, and the most expensive thing I can buy is like 120 currency or something, and that's just a thing that would I don't know, increase some stat I don't care about. And then the dust will cost me like 4 currency, and that will increase the power of my thing that increases the damage I do to the enemy player, which is a huge deal. That's like how soon I win the match.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's balanced that way.
The other example is there's a talisman that you can install which increases the health of your own pyre just for that character being on the field.
Right.
So you give it to a character and it just gives plus 20 to your pyre. So it's like 100. Every time the enemy scores a dunk, it reduces your pyre by the amount of damage that character can do. But if you just keep pouring dust into this, this pyre buffing talisman, then it removes all the questions. It removes your need for other talismans because it's just like a default. You just your pyre is twice as tough if you put loads and loads of dust into this one thing.
Yeah,
there's loads of kind of weird item imbalance, and I'm really not sold on the combat system.
They do have an interesting system for what seems like their intention is to mix up how you're going to play, and so for story reasons, at various encounters, they will just tell you, like, this person's just not going to play this right. They just refuse to, for this reason, for some plot reason. They want to make way for this other character, or they don't like this other character, or whatever. And that's a good idea. Like, the idea of mixing up your playstyle is generally good. They tried to do this in Transistor in a way I really didn't like, which is every time you died, whatever you used most when you died was locked off from you, and you couldn't use it again.
Right.
Their idea was if you had a dominant strategy, then you should not be able to use that strategy again. But because it only happened when you die, it was like, this is a strategy, it wasn't working. That was my best thing, and you took it away from me. Now I'm going to fail even more, and and then it'll take even more things away from me, and it was a terrible downward spiral. And so in this game, they are, there's two different things. One is, every now and then, for story reasons, a character will opt out of the right. They will refuse to participate, even if you want them to. And then also, when you score with a character, if you actually throw them into the pyre, they need to respawn for a while, so you can't use them immediately. Neither of those things totally work for me, because the talismans feel like almost as important as the other stuff, and if someone refuses to play, you can still take a talisman and put it on another character. Yeah. So it's still like, well, okay, Rukio doesn't want to play, and is it Ruki?
Ruki.
Yeah. Ruki doesn't want to play, he's our fastest character, but I have another character who's like, 90% as fast as him. So I'll give them the same
like
talisman.
The little worm dude who's like really fast.
Yeah, and then it's pretty similar, and it doesn't affect things that much. And then also, I think I didn't appreciate with Pyre, because I haven't got far enough with it, is the outcome of the game, winning is not necessarily the best thing. There are situations, depends how much you care about the characters versus how much you care about winning the game. But the game is intentionally about, do you really want to beat this character? Do you really want them to be banished and you not to be banished? As far as I played, that never came up. It was always we're just playing some game for points, and I don't know what the points mean, but it's just a random thing. Apparently, eventually it gets to the point where, someone in this game might get to leave this whole realm and ascend or whatever, and you get to decide that through who wins, and also if you do win, then you get to pick who gets to go. I didn't get that far, but yeah, it's that's interesting. I like the idea of divorcing gameplay success from narrative. I don't know, narrative success, I guess. The idea that, like, you've done well. Do you want this character to leave, or do you want them to stick around? And from their story, they want to leave. Do you fulfill that desire, or do you keep them around because you like them, or do you keep them around because you failed at the game? Yeah,
I've just hit that first decision point, actually, and that's where the game kind of resets and it gives you the loop that you're going to have to do like over and over again to actually basically win. And that is a really interesting decision. And I think we should like kind of come back to Pyre like in a future pod when we've both like gone through it a little bit more, because those decisions are super interesting, actually. And I just got rid of the most boring person, like as a character. So it's weird. I'd love to know what you choose.
Yeah. So for me, there's a character who's the knight guy. His mechanic is really interesting, but I hate him narratively. He's a comedy character. He's just pure like, look at me, I'm funny, I'm doing this funny thing. And I don't find it funny, and so I'm just like, fuck off, mate. But then when I play games with him, it's like he has a different mechanic. Like, the way he works is fundamentally different to other characters. Yeah. And so, like, mechanically, I want to play as him.
He's really good in the fights as well. Yeah. He's super fast. He's really good, yeah.
I think, to go back to the first question about whether you have to be, like, EA to make a good sports game? That was the question, right?
That was the question.
Oh yeah,
Like, sorry.
I remember now.
I think
We forgot that.
I would say that you don't, because I mean, obviously, there's loads of like sports games that are made by people who aren't EA, which are fun or good, or that do interesting things. And there's loads of indie projects on that you can play at, things like the Wild Rumpus, or that have a lot of sports elements and have an understanding of competitive stuff. And I think there's a couple of like Michael Bro things that like experiment with the idea of like lane pushing and competitive like ball throwing and passing and things in really interesting ways. But I would say that like something which came up recently was the Behold the Kickmen game. And it's essentially a game that kind of, I think, developed from a sort of jokey, snarky kind of position on football, and that it's incomprehensible, and there's a lot of like that's where a lot of its humor comes from. But something that came up a lot in the reviews and in chats that I've had with people who have played it, I haven't, is about how, in sort of not really understanding football and being content to sort of make fun of it and that be the level at which the game is operating, it also then misses out on elements like particular balance problems, or problems with the AI, which some of the things like the offside rule, it can be, it's a thing to ridicule because it's not a thing that you can easily sum up in a sentence. And, it is genuinely easier to show people how it works using condiments on a table. And that has become a kind of running joke. But like, it also does perform a function in the game. And I think things like that get overlooked. And you end up in this strange situation where you've got this sort of amorphous mess of play that's happening that you can't guide into a fun experience without an understanding of how particular rules are implemented or how they work. And so obviously at companies like EA, they've got studios who've been looking into that for years and have an understanding of balance and have budgets and have research and have, like that history of iteration and the relationships with the teams and things, so they can implement very specific commercial sides. But there's also just a sense of like, I think you can be any size studio and make a sports type game work, but you have to, it goes back to the core ideas of like balancing things, and is it fun to play? And if it is, then why is it? And if it isn't, then why isn't it? If you see what I mean? Because, otherwise you're coasting on the strength of the premise, and that is not a healthy thing for a game specifically to do. And on the other thing, I would just say that like, I got a bit lost in the question, but I think it was essentially, which games do like hover over tooltips as explanations well. And even though I don't like the genre, but like those complicated turn-based strategy type things where you've got a lot of resources that you need to manage, even though I don't like them, and even though I find the resource management stressful and I get lost really easily, the majority of them do have the ability to hover over and actually tell you what the resource is. So that is something that is good. Is that even the question?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'd say we'd like
There's
build.
a lot of questions.
Okay.
So 2 different people's questions.
I was
and
like
each person
desperately
asked,
trying to like
2 different
hang on
ones.
to them, and I was like,
And also, this is collectively question 2 of about 10.
I would say that like Behold the Kickmen, like if your understanding of the sport is so poor, then the satire of that is going to be stupid, and that's what's happened. With
Unless it's about not understanding the sport, which could work. Like, you can...
Why make that thing?
I feel like there's comedy in...
a sort of self-deprecating attempt to recreate football. from
I'm a
first
buffoon.
principles,
This is a complicated thing. Here's what I think it works. There's like a pitch. The goalkeeper is called the goalkeeper, and the misinterpretations are, I think, potentially funny. But if it strays into the territory of like, I know what you think it is as a football fan, and I'm telling you it's like this, then that becomes annoying and offensive.
I think it's such a flimsy thing, if you see what I mean. Like you could see the potential for humour in that if it's done right, but you can also see how it could just be a really flimsy kind of, here's a broad strokes like jab at this thing, and I haven't and I think anything is ripe for being sort of poked fun at. That's that doesn't bother me at all. But I think if it's, from what I've seen and heard, like I say, admittedly I haven't played the game, so I don't want to make this a definitive judgment, but nothing that anyone who has played has told me has made me think that it's come up with anything, come up with any new twists on jokes that I've heard 100 times before. Yeah.
If the question is like, is just making a sports game kind of doomed, unless it's a massively established thing, I feel like Rocket League is a pretty good counterexample to that.
Yeah, that's just a really good point.
It's a totally made up sport, and it's just great. Yeah, everyone loves it. It just really works.
But they designed that game to be fun instead of to attack something that millions of people like.
And it was their second try, right? They made a first game that was called like Super Powered Rocket Cars that push balls or something.
It was like
I can't remember what it's called.
Complicated.
Yeah, really elaborate name, and they had a go at it, and
Super mega rocket car McJigger.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about that game that suggests the rules were wrong or it was failing because of any mechanical reason. But for whatever reason, their second attempt at it, which was Rocket League, really clicked with people. And it's very simple. It's essentially football, but you're a car. And the physics of it obviously have to be just right. And there's also, you can thrust, and because you can thrust, technically that means you can kind of fly, but how much and to what extent you can fly is very much down to player skill, and it's very much a game where like the basic way of playing it is available to everybody, and the more advanced way of playing it is only available to people who really understand the mechanics.
The best execution of the Behold the Kickman joke is Blurn's ball from Futurama.
Oh, yeah.
God, yeah. I've referenced that even in Heat Signature.
I mentioned it the other day. Today, actually, I think. Was it?
Blurn's locked is just a very funny phrase.
That whole sequence is amazing. Like, there's a 30-second clip of Futurama that's just beautiful.
Chris, what was I writing about?
It starts with Fry being indignant that in the future they've made any changes to baseball at all.
Yeah.
Like, how could you change baseball? It was like perfect. And I was like, so you find baseball interesting, huh? And then it was like, multi-ball, Blurn's locked.
For that. But
so we have a device.
Lucio Ball in Overwatch, because I was writing about the summer games coming up again, and I was just like, it's Blurn's Ball.
So we were doing we have an elaborate system for unique items in Heat Signature that we want to give to people in an interesting way. Programmer John Winder I gave him the task of making that system work, but I didn't actually tell him what the unique item should be, so he had to just make up one himself. And he made a grenade launcher that basically just fires like 3 grenades at once. And I thought it was great. Actually really good, a unique item. But the name of it was just multi-grenade launcher. And I thought, well, it should be called the multi-ball. Because of that Futurama scene. Just like multi-ball. I thought, well, multi-ball was also chaotic. So it should be at least 5 grenades, not 3 grenades. So now we have a device called the multi-ball that just fires 5 grenades. There's not really any practical reason why you'd want to fire 5 grenades rather than 1, but it's very funny. And I kind of want it to like, if those grenades kill more than 5 people, it should just pop up a message that says Blurn's locked.
Next up, Chloe writes, Dear Loot Crate and +3 Crowbar, I'm quite the fan of short roguelikes and roguelites, such as Spelunky, Crypt of the Necrodancer, and Cave Blazers, in which the player starts with nothing and over the course of a half hour gains items which progressively make the run more interesting and unique. A lot of games in this genre have a quick restart key which will instantly reset the game run when you press it. In some games, if I don't feel like the run is going well enough after the second floor, I'll just restart because it's faster and lose what possibly could have been a great run if I'd stuck with it. Other games are even worse. In Crypt of the Necrodancer, I often find myself repeatedly pressing quick restart until I find a run where the hidden shop spawns in view of the starting room because having fast access to it makes more interesting. I feel this severe impatience with games like this is causing me to lose out on otherwise good runs, but I'm reluctant to stop because with each run lasting around 30 minutes, it's easy to come out of an anticlimactic run feeling as though it was a waste of time. Are there any games that you find yourself restarting a lot because it's just not going well enough? Or alternatively, are there any features in games you abuse at potentially the detriment of your enjoyment? As always, keep up the good pod and Chloe.
Yeah, I used to have this with Spelunky actually, and like, as much as I love that game mode, if level 1 does not go well, I would usually just restart it. It would just be like, particularly because like the most common way to fuck up was dart traps, and dart traps did 2 damage. You have 4 health. Most things do 1 damage. Dart traps do 2 damage. And they're the hardest thing to see. So the most common cause of failure was something you didn't see happened, and then you lost half your health. And if that happened on level 1, there's just no reason to carry on. It was just like, I should just start again, because level 1 is different every time. It's not going to be boring to repeat that stuff. It's going to be playing new content, essentially. And carrying on from here is just carrying on from a position where I'm just half as likely to succeed. So it's just kind of terrible. And that's why I kept... I was always a big campaigner for dart traps to only do 1 damage, because anything that made me restart the game, I always thought, this is not how it should work. A roguelike should be a game where, you play it through. Like, you start, maybe bad things happen, but you're always so invested in your playthrough that outweighs any setbacks. And Spelunky was a game where the setbacks could sometimes be so big that it was just, well, on level 1, that outweighs my investment in this playthrough, and I just want to restart.
But presumably that doesn't apply when it was the, you'd push through when it was the daily challenge. That would be the
daily
exception.
challenge was a good antidote to that, because you had to carry on, because it was going to be compared to your friends and all this stuff. That it was good. It didn't, like, Spelunky was incredibly popular amongst game developers and games journalists, and I think less popular amongst the general populace. And so for me and my friends, it was good for a long time, and we had a nice honeymoon period where that worked. For other games, I think these days it's incredibly hard to have a community big enough and interconnected enough that daily challenge really makes sense. And so the alternative is like maybe a weekly challenge. There is actually the Crate and Crowbar roguelike community has a monthly challenge for Spelunky. So like I think it's the first daily challenge of the month. They all do it, and they all compare scores, because it's just unrealistic to expect everybody to play it 30 times a month. And Michael Bro's game, Imbroglio, has an Izu challenge, which is, I think it's every 4 days or 5 days or something. He decided that daily challenge was too frequent and weekly challenge was too seldom. And so he looked for any culture that had any kind of concept of a week that was less than 7 days. And I don't remember what culture it is. I think it might be a Central American one. Has a concept of Izu, which is, I think, 4 days. And so he has a new daily a new challenge every 4 days.
That's cool. I think the only time it's happened for me is Yoshi Touch and Go on the DS, and because I got really good at the first bit, because what you're doing is Baby Mario falls out of the sky with like a little, you can guide him using clouds, so he picks up coins from the sky as he comes down, and when he lands, a Yoshi egg hatches, and that combo then proceeds into the level to do the platformy type stuff. So it was essentially just a way of determining the awesomeness of your Yoshi as you started. But because that was a game that really got its claws into me, I would actually just ditch any run where I got less than the best Yoshi at the start, because it just felt like, well, I mean, given that I know I can do this, why wouldn't I? And also because that part of the game was genuinely fun for me, so I didn't mind repeating it over and over. I think the best Yoshi was the black Yoshi, the black spotted Yoshi. And so I would sort of just keep playing until I got that, and then like take on the rest of the level challenge.
Yeah, it's tricky because if you make a roguelike where when you start it's always the same, and then the difference comes like an hour in or whatever, that becomes a lot less appealing for people who are restarting a lot, because their restarting is going to be exactly the same for a big chunk of their time. And so there's a big tension between, you know, the people who want each playthrough to be different would like the difference to come as early as possible. And then the people who don't want you to cheese it and restart for the sake of getting new stuff want that difference to come later, so that you can't do that. So that when you restart artificially to create new choices, you don't get to see what the unique, interesting thing you're going to get is. You have to play for a little while.
Our next question comes from Mitchell, who writes, Dear Crater... No, hang on. Dear Cater and Crabrow.
What?
Does that make sense to anybody?
Not to me.
Well, I mean, it's Crate and Crowbar, but I mean... Crowbar.
Yeah, yes.
Modified strangely.
But, I mean, aren't most of the things just playing with the words of the podcast?
Let's not get hung up on this here all night. While recently replaying some of Mirror's Edge Catalyst, I was reminded of how much I enjoy being in that city. It's a shame that the game's world is so much better than the story or combat. In fact, I realised that I would be perfectly willing to play any game at all in that setting, even if it had no parkour or anything else that you would associate with Mirror's Edge. What were some unlikely combinations of setting and genre that you think would be potentially quite good? A prison architect style management sim where you manage Aperture Sciences labs, Team Fortress 2, a Telltale adventure, a city builder where the city is Cloudbank from Transistor, ? Thanks for reading, everybody. Mitchell, who's Oxbait on Discord.
I'd play a modern iteration of Oni in the Mirror's Edge city.
That was great. Oni was great.
Yeah.
That's by Bungie, right?
Yep.
And it had, like, its controls are very, very strange now, but the vision and the idea of it was fucking cool. And, the vision for the city and the environments weren't too far off what Mirror's Edge Catalyst is. I think.
It was very much a game about, like, unlocking new cool moves to do against people, right?
Yeah.
Because you were sort of like a ninja lady who was beating up people with guns, and you had a whole range of moves. And as you progressed through the game, you unlocked new ones, and you got better and better at it, and you got more and more finesse. And I remember it being, like, one of the first games where I loved it, and then I thought, I want to play this again. And then I started playing it again, and I was like, none of these moves work anymore. Like, it wasn't just you discovered new moves. It was like those moves were actually unlocked. So even knowing how to do them from the start of the game did not help you. They weren't all unlocked yet, so it didn't work. Gotcha. So it was like, from the start, you just have basic punches and kicks, and it was just like, oh fuck. All my muscle memory is geared towards playing a high-level character this, and now I can't anymore.
The fancy of that game was awesome, though, and to attempt that at the time, like the idea that you're this Matrix-style, like, martial arts expert taking on small groups of goons is, still
it was really cool. I also really liked, she changed her outfit throughout the whole game, and that was, like, strangely a compelling form of progress. It was like, wow, she's wearing a new costume now. Something actually happened.
The old Tomb Raider games did that really well as well. Like, Lara would travel the globe and then appear in a completely different set.
What genre would you adapt Oni into? I ask because that was literally the question.
Reasonable.
Shadow Tactics. the samurai strategy stealth game, which I haven't played yet, but I plan to.
I thought was it genre and location or something? Or
No,
was
it was worlds from one game, genre from a different game.
So I would be a lot more interested in Don't Nod's vampire game if it was Vampire Viva Pinata. And not what they're doing, which just looks really, really 6 out of 10 boring. Like, you know, sure, fine, whatever. But like, imagine, like, miserable, rainy, Victorian Viva Pinata with vampires.
I can't imagine that, weirdly enough.
We're saying that you're a vampire and the kind of the garden you're creating are actually just the proles that you feed on, and you're kind of growing them in different districts and then feeding on them.
Well, like, or because, you know, you're sort of trying to cultivate, like, maybe a nest of vampires in this imaginary game, or, like, you're sort of luring in different types of vampires to your cemetery.
It's like a dungeon keeper.
Like, yeah, just kind of, like, attracting them and then, like, you know, breeding them or, you know, hitting them until they explode in blood. Like splatters everywhere. But, you know, do you not think that would be quite good? I'd play that. I would be the only one, but I would play that. And I would talk about it often on the podcast.
Yeah, that's cool.
I would enjoy that.
So our next question comes from John, who writes quite a long email. Don't have time to read all of, because it's long. But he writes about the kind of convergence of pen and paper and computer game RPG design. And goes on to say, the continuing discussion made me think about the difference between conventional and computer RPGs. I reflected on a hopeful dream of mine, a game that is the thief of social interaction games. I can't say social games or it calls to mind Farmville. What I mean is a game that revolutionizes social interaction gameplay in an open world in a way that Thief did for stealth gameplay in a somewhat open world. I imagine this as hustling for the thieves or the Mythic Dawn in Oblivion's Imperial City, or being one of the job givers in GTA. This is still not a question. Sorry. Typically, I get these kind of gameplay urges out in my pen and paper games. I'm doing what amounts to the Mythic Dawn game now using the Burning Wheel, but I was wondering, do you think the video games can deliver on my dream of a compelling social interaction-based open-world RPG, or have I just missed them all? So, all I was going to say in response to this is that this is kind of what a lot of the more open MMOs have done for a long time. Like, EVE is famous for providing roles for players that are not as, like, active doers or anything, but as the kind of, literally the GTA mission giver, the person who sits at the center of the, you know, conspiratorial or criminal or corporate spiderweb and hands out objectives. And that's what's cool about them. It's like, as soon as the game mechanics can be so kind of dispersed that one person can just have the role of coordinator, then that's super exciting, right? Like, that's when you get into that kind of territory. I don't think it will ever happen in a single-player game by necessity, because if it's deterministic, then it's a management game, and it's not really social at all. If you want to have a game about actually, like, manipulating social and political patterns to achieve an end, then it has to be multiplayer, because you would have hit that already with pen and paper. And if it has to be multiplayer, then MMO is the obvious place to go looking for it. And I think it does exist. Like, it's something that already exists in Hackmud, to talk about my own game for a bit. Like, and it's something that will become more important as time goes on as well. Like, if you like the idea of being the person who just gives out and receives information at the center of a web, then that's the kind of thing we want to encourage. So it's a legit thing, but I think the wrong place to look for it is in single player RPGs. I think the right place to look for it is in MMOs.
Have there always been 2 bottles of rhubarb juice?
Yes.
Interesting.
One was in the fridge for a while, and then I brought it up in the break.
I thought maybe we had a mimic. Because I literally sat up, and then there were 2 bottles, and I was like, okay.
That does explain why you hit the second bottle with a wrench for a lot of the first half of that podcast.
I'll get the post-it notes.
It was just one of those really weird real world video game moments where, because we'd been talking about Prey for so long, I was like, I don't want to alarm anybody.
We do surprisingly have 2 bottles of rum now.
God.
One's a little bit smaller than the other one, thank God.
It's an inadequate mimic. A young mimic.
Oh, Babby.
Little teenage mimic.
The next question comes from Tom. A mimic of any of the Toms in this room, perhaps. Who writes, warm greetings to the great crate and the subpar crowbar. First of all, happy 200th episode, unless you're not reading this on the 200th episode, in which case replace 200th with the appropriate episode number, or don't bring attention to it at all, as celebrating episode 206 would be rather odd. Too late. I didn't bring attention
Save
to it.
this up
done.
till 206.
I really should have read this out on episode 206. Too late. Your discussion a number of pods ago regarding playing games against the devil got me thinking about the kinds of games the devil would make you play if you were trapped in eternal damnation. You know, normal stuff. One of my biggest personal gripes with games is terrible control schemes, so my question is this. If you were forced to play video games in hell for eternity, which of these would you rather suffer through? This is a really good question, incidentally. 1. Overly responsive controls. Your mouse always swings slightly further than you want it to, and button presses register twice when you're sure you pressed it once. 2.
That's awful.
Unresponsive controls. Every input you make has a slight delay, which changes in length frequently enough that you can't learn to predict it. Yours lovingly, a random dude who totally isn't the devil, Thomas.
I remember
This is a fucking
part.
great question.
I want to go for the over-responsive controls. For mouse sensitivity, it feels like you could eventually get used to that. For button presses counting twice, obviously you couldn't really entirely get used to that.
Yes, you can.
Well, okay.
I say that because it turns out there's a bug with Logitech mice on Windows 10 where they do often click twice all the time. And me and Pip were both using Logitech mice until I gave Pip my SteelSeries mouse and sacrificed myself to the god of double clicking forever. Which is possibly the most heroic thing I will ever do.
I'd
Just
forgotten.
in case anyone misses.
Sorry.
So I've been dealing with double clicking all the time by accident
Huh.
for a while now. And so I feel like I could deal with the over-responsive side of this better.
God, I learnt heroically to reprogram my muscle memory for Zelda Breath of the Wild, such that the button I usually think of as cancelling is now confirm, and the button I usually think of as confirming is now cancelling. And I did it eventually, you know, like 90% of my time with Zelda, I would end up confirming things I meant to cancel and cancelling things I meant to confirm. Which is, it's an error that double compounds itself, right? If you do something and then it tells you, oh, you want to do this? And you're like, what? No, I want to cancel that. So you press what you think is the cancel button, which is actually the confirm button. So now you've both done this thing and confirmed it, which is terrible. I finally got around that and learnt how to use those buttons. And now every time I play anything with an Xbox controller, I do the exact opposite thing, and I confirm things I meant to cancel and cancel things I meant to confirm. So that is my personal hell. I don't know if that's an answer to the question.
What you're saying is you're living it every day.
Yeah, I live in hell every day. There's nothing you can do to me that's worse than my current life.
This podcast got real. Tom?
Oh, I think I could learn to live with oversensitive mouse as opposed to undersensitive, particularly the point where the questioner describes the undersensitivity changing value.
Yeah,
that's the
that
thing
sounds
you
like
can't
hell.
compensate with. Like it's always going to be a curse. Where if it's like consistently oversensitive, I would eventually get the muscle memory to deal with it.
Yeah, it's interesting, like having a 1 second lag or something. We used to play Action Quake 2 in a clan back in the day before like broadband internet, so we all had dial-up modems, and the speed of those was variable by a huge extent. Like 56k was a huge deal, and other people would be on 14k, so your lag time would be dramatically different. And one of the best players in our clan was a guy who was on the worst ping. He had like a sort of 400 or 500 millisecond ping, and he was just really good at knowing what we were going to do in 500 milliseconds. And so you would be chasing him and you'd round the corner thinking, I've got the M4, I'm going to destroy him because my aim is going to be way better and I'm going to be able to shoot him. And then the second you rounded the corner, a grenade goes off, and he threw it like 3 seconds ago because he knew you were going to go there in 3 seconds time.
He headshotted you 6 months ago.
It's the Ozymandias of headshots.
His username was Pig Fetus. So
Charming. Fantastic question. And by the way, that the previous question where the question was actually what final game would you play versus death?
yeah,
Was also one of my favourite questions on the Great Crowbar ever.
Yeah, indeed. I think it's probably the question of format to go for, to be honest. Like, what metaphysical terror would you offset? It does it. Pip?
I think it is skewed. Like, it is the element of unpredictability that makes one option so much more unpalatable than the other. Like, I think it would probably be a fairer phrasing if it was like, would you rather have unpredictable oversensitivity or unpredictable undersensitivity? But I'm not answering because the devil will then know. So, I mean, obviously I'm not planning on going to hell, but no one does, right? So, I mean...
That's true.
Like, yeah. Every good intention takes me closer, which is why I've got no good intentions on purpose. Bad intentions all the way.
the road to hell is paved with nothing, because Pip did not start it.
It's not a very well paved road. More of a dirt track.
Yeah, it's hard to call it a road, really. We're struggling with semantics here.
I took the
It's a
road
stump.
less travelled by making all of my intentions shitty. So long, suckers.
Not going very quickly, because this road isn't very well surfaced.
Enjoy your terrible control schemes in hell.
The road to Shitsville is paved with shitty roads.
What are we talking about? Perhaps Aidan has the answer. He writes, how much Patreon money would it take to make Tom Francis play through Dark Souls? At least as far as Anor Londo. I understand there are lots of things preventing someone from playing it from a learning period, but I would love to hear his thoughts on it. Thanks, Aidan.
I did start playing Dark Souls a few times, and the sort of tutorial features you sort of confronting some kind of boss in a sense that you're not supposed to defeat them just yet, and then you run away, and I think you come back, and then you are supposed to defeat them.
You fall on it.
I think I did both those things. I think I completed that tutorial, but I did not click with the game at all, and I didn't get anything from it. I felt like I just didn't enjoy combat at all. I really did not want any more further combat to take place ever again. And from what I gather, I think combat does take place on a repeated basis.
Somewhat,
for the rest of that
A
game.
little bit.
You can join me in the Dork Souls, am I right, Karen?
Yeah, that it wasn't for me.
How much Patreon money would it take?
You would have to, if you could provide me with a sufficient amount of Patreon money that I didn't need to release my next game. Like, if it was equivalent to the best possible scenario of what my next game could make, then I would happily not release my next game and instead play Dark Souls.
Right.
Is that
but-
true though,
No,
really?
Yeah.
Would you not
That amount
prefer?
of money? Yeah.
Don't worry. Tom Francis, he
Hang on.
has a price.
I'm not fussy about how I make the money. I just...
Are you inserting your own condition here that if someone paid you that money and you didn't release your own game that you have been working on for 3 years, then you will play Dark Souls?
I'm saying right now, the amount of money you'd have to pay me would have to be... I had a physics teacher in high school,
All right.
if I may digress,
There we go.
who people would ask him, like, you know, can't you just give me an A on this exam? Like, what would I have to pay you to give me an A? And he would say, well, I used to work for the patent office, and I was fairly well paid there, but I found it very boring, so I quit that job and I became a physics teacher. So if you can pay me more than what I was earning at the patent office for the rest of my life, then I will gladly give you an A on your exam. So he's like, my fee for bribery is all of the money I could possibly earn by being an honest citizen in the most profitable job I could do being an honest citizen. And if you pay me more than that, absolutely, I'll breach all my morals.
Yeah, but I
and do it.
don't think that that's true either. I reckon, like, they wouldn't, right?
I think he might have. He was a pretty logical guy. Anyway, yeah, right now, I'm not going to do that because I want to finish my game. If you ask me after I finish my game, my conditions might relax. Before I finish my game, you would have to pay me all of the money I might possibly earn from finishing my game in order to delay me from finishing my game.
How much can I get paid for playing Dark Souls?
It's a rare offer, this.
You already did.
No, but I only went up to the Capra Demon, and then I screamed and ran away. And
Someone said they
got
would
on
pay
with my
us
life.
to do a podcast about
should.
Poirot.
Really?
I would get paid for that. I would happily be the recipient of money for my opinions about Poirot.
I think it was the Poirot role-playing game. I don't entirely remember what we said last week, but apparently we said
was it
something
the
about
murder mystery
doing
thing
like a
that we
tabletop
were
thing.
talking
with-
about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone wanted that and was willing to pay for it.
The next question comes from Orbit, who writes, "Dear movable object, unstoppable force." That is very funny.
Yeah, it's good.
First off, congrats on nearly reaching or having reached 200 episodes. It's kind of amazing reading questions for people who are not sure quite what episode we're up to. What a marvellous achievement, and I wish you many happy returns and podding for years to come. Granted, that last bit may have been mostly motivated by selfish reasons. My question, in episode 191 and others, you discussed Destiny 2, a game I'm looking forward to despite not having played the first one for exclusivity-related reasons. In your discussion of the series coming to PC, you talked about there not really being a game in the same genre available on the platform. However, I have played and enjoyed The Division, which I think is at least aiming for a similar experience. Is there a reason it hasn't come up? Do you consider it's too different from Destiny? So we should answer this bit first. This is a reasonable point, like it didn't come up, and I actually reviewed The Division for various people, so I should have thought about it. The reason is, it's just miles away from being anywhere near as good as Destiny, because it's not a very good shooter, and Destiny is a very good shooter. The Division's alright, but it's not a very good shooter, and Destiny is. And you'd be amazed how much difference that makes.
The third person, first person split is a massive difference, like experiential difference in a shooter. I think that separates Destiny from a lot of the things that people tend to compare Destiny to, like making it a fantastic first person shooter that happens to have similar like loot and experience loops. It's still a very different game for being a first person shooter, because the discipline and skill that goes into making a good shooter is very different from that goes into making a third person shooter.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same. Like Division's a lot more like Warframe than it is like Destiny.
I think the other thing is just is also that one of the elements that I really liked about Destiny was the social side of things, that I could, go raiding or, marauding with friends and catch up as we played. And I know that some people did mention having that aspect when they played The Division for various reasons, I think in comments and things. But I don't remember any of my friends sticking with The Division for long. There were people who reviewed it, and I think Graham stuck with it for a while. But apart from that, there was just no one there to play with that I knew. So it wasn't like I was being tempted in the way that, like, everyone talks about Plunkbat, and it's like this permanent thing of, I know I won't like this game, I know I won't be good at this game, but everyone I know is in there and maybe I should pick it up. The Division just stopped being a thing that was talked about pretty much the second it came out, because so many people just thought it was a bit meh.
Next part of Tom.
He was yawning.
Use your
Yeah, I was just saying.
Next part of Orbit's question is a grudge, which is, as someone who lives in Canada, and I'm sure residents of the British Isles can sympathise, I'm subject to the ever-changing exchange rates, particularly to the US dollar. 5 years ago, the US and Canadian dollars were about on par, which meant that games on Steam would have cost the same in either currency. This was before Valve implemented separate currency regions in North America. However, with the weakening of the Canadian dollar in those regions, I would often have to shell out $79 for a new AAA release. My grudge is twofold. One, these prices are based purely on the conversion of USD to the equivalent local currency without any regard for purchasing power. It's not like our wages go up to compensate. And two, the fact that these prices get corrected up when a currency gets weaker compared to the almighty dollar but never down after it gets stronger. For example, Prey now costs 80 Canadian dollars, which comes down to about 65 US dollars, while the price in euros is still 60 euros, even though that means you're paying the equivalent of 70 US dollars. In short, the fact that pricing region seems to be mostly a vehicle for mere profit instead of accurately resembling the current exchange rate. A galloping, horsey orbit.
So I rebelled against Steam's prices for UK customers anyway for Gunpoint because it was Steam gives you suggested prices, right? You specify, you usually tell them what you want it to be in US dollars, and they figure out what that should be in every other currency. And for Gunpoint, I wanted it to be $10, and they converted that to like £8, I think it was, or like $7.99 or something. And I thought, well, that's at the time that was not $10. Like $10 was much closer to £6. It was like $6.50 or something.
God, those were the days.
Good old glory days. This was like 4 years ago. Because being based in the UK myself, and having a pretty keen sense of the pound and the dollar, I basically set custom prices for every region that existed at the time, rounding down. So it was like, it was $10, but it was in the UK. I set it to £6 instead of £8. And it was just a whole number of pounds. It wasn't 99 anything. It was just like, I wanted to be a kind of clean, clear-cut, round number. I wasn't trying to trick anybody. I'm not trying to pretend it's less than it is. It's £6, and that's what it is. And then, I still do that with Gunpoint. But then they kept introducing new currencies and like, what do you want to price it in Russia? What do you want to price it in the Ukraine? What do you want to price it in this territory? What do you want to price it in Kazakhstan? And I was like, oh shit, I don't know. Like, I have no sense of what that currency is. I don't know what it means. And, the way Valve explained it is that the reason those prices are different is it's not based on currency conversion rates at all. It's, purely based on purchasing power. It's supposed to be a reflection of how much a person in that country can afford to spend on a video game and how much they do typically spend based on statistics on video games. And so it can be unfair for individuals, but it's supposed to be calibrated to that country's purchasing power. So if your country is wealthy, it's not a question of how your currency converts to that other currency. It's a question of how much money people in your country typically are supposed to have.
Where did they take
that's how it's supposed to work.
from?
I don't know if it does work that way. I don't know if that is
Interestingly,
accurate.
this gels with something I learned when I was in China, which is that Steam's prices given that Steam is this strangely official, unofficial grey market entry point for AAA games into China, the going rate for a AAA game in China is $29 because that is the local purchasing power, and that's what it's determined to be. Nothing to do with the local currency to US dollar rate. It's absolutely everything to do with what people are willing to pay.
Right.
And so if you want to buy The Witcher 3 in China, it's $29 as a standard rate, plus discounts when sales come around. And whereas it's double that anywhere else.
Yeah.
Plus, I feel like there's a slight premise behind the question that suggests that companies have some sort of mandate to, be fair across regions. That's not what companies are there to do. They're there to make as much money as they can from each region. That's literally their purpose. And spending power is a very complicated metric that is far more complicated than simple exchange rates because of varying tax situations for citizens in each country, plus median, living, the wages that people are on, etc., etc.
I would be interested in where Valve draw the data that they do use from.
Yeah.
Like which
I don't know.
databases, which surveys, which, general bits of information. Because, it also would presumably make a whole bunch of assumptions as to who is buying games, who games are for, whether it's better to, go on averages, like a mean average, or whether it's better to, lower things slightly and potentially reach more people, or like, you know, it's kind of, it's an interesting thing, and I'd just be interested for them to show they're working. They won't, ever.
I wonder to what extent you regionalise, like, spending power within states within the US is going to be different from state to state, you know.
Yeah.
Do you offer different prices for different people in different states? You know, at what point does it become unacceptable to consumers? It's an interesting question.
Well, yeah, and like, it's kind of interesting in terms of like, you know, the whole thing of, you know, regional workarounds and, you know, like the sort of arms race technologically on that front to sort of stop people exploiting loopholes, but keep loopholes, and, you know, that kind of keep finding loopholes rather for kind of consumer versus system. And also like in terms of things that are bad for the business in terms of it being a potentially awkward conversation when a currency changes. Like I know that Riot recently increased they increased the cost of their premium in-game currency for League of Legends, as in you get fewer Riot points for the amount that you spend nowadays. But that was after in their blog post, they explained that this was because after monitoring what had happened to the pound after Brexit votes had come in, like they'd sort of waited for a while to see whether it would like bounce back. And because it hadn't, they then needed to, you know, blah, 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 business, blah, blah, you know, their own, you know, obviously they've got motives and reasons for doing all of this, but obviously that's not going to be a popular move amongst a part of your consumer base. So it's like there's also that interesting thing of how you broach a change in an ongoing game, you know, like if you need to raise a price or lower a price. Like in the UK, we've tended to really avoid that stuff, I think. But like, yeah, it's kind of interesting watching it happen.
Our next question comes from Ryland, who writes, "Love the podcast and wanted to tell you about an odd moment I experienced. I currently work as the night watchman for my small city in the United States. This generally involves driving around at night, making sure that things are okay, checking out streetlights, downed trees, and other odd calls. The other night I was driving through a subdivision when I saw what seemed like an entire apartment's worth of possessions down even to the carpets strewn across the curb. Half seemed to have been placed there, but half seemed to have fallen from a height. I was surprised that no one had taken anything, and that there was no explanation immediately obvious. Aha, I realised. This is the exact kind of dramatic scene one would find in an immersive sim. Surely there must be some kind of audio log somewhere nearby with an improbable recording of this. Unfortunately, any such audio log would have probably consisted solely of a pleading man shouting, 'Baby, please, oh God, baby, know my stuff, please, we can still talk.' Have you ever had one of those strange moments where you wished for an unlikely exposition dump to explain your current scenario? Love the pod, and cheers from the trash fire, Ryland."
This sounds like a great premise for an immersive sim.
Yeah,
You're the night watchman for a town, like a whole town, like just everything that happens in this town is your watch. And then you just find an entire apartment's worth of stuff lying around. That's amazing.
Cool.
Your first port of call is, of course, to find the nearest vent and go in it, and then, you know, as you go through, you'll surely at least get experience points, if not find the info hub that you're seeking.
You want to mouse over things, see what glows as well.
Yeah, I would pick up each item and rotate it in front of my face until I found the secret message on the underside.
Nice. Yeah. There was one situation where I would have really appreciated an info dump, in terms of when I was a lot younger and my parents and obviously us as kids moved house. We arrived and the previous occupants had obviously moved out, but they'd taken the little metal things that you get in doorways to keep the carpet from peeling back up. And they'd taken all of the light shades and light bulbs and things.
Excuse me.
And it was just such an odd thing because we obviously hadn't done the same. So it's not like they needed all of those extra things. And they clearly like wouldn't need to keep the carpets down because
This is causing an ongoing distraction. It's somewhere between a yawn and a snort. I can't really explain it beyond that.
it was like, I don't even know what that was, Tom. I don't know. I can't. You've broken those two.
Sorry, I'll try to hide it. Please continue.
Go on.
Well, I mean, like, I don't really have an end to this because we never resolved it. They just took all of these odd things with them and then just never... it was never explained why, and I have no idea what it...
What do you think they did in their new place? Because their new place probably would have had these things, right?
That was my point. We hadn't taken them with us. Like, were we supposed to have done? We suddenly needed them because they were all missing. But, like, because they were downsizing house and we were upsizing, so they would have had extras and we would have had too few. So
Yeah.
I genuinely have no idea what was even happening there. But, like, I mean, I have more than made up for that in that I now live my life like a complicated thing that requires an info dump every time Chris doesn't understand what I've done.
I'm good.
No, you're not. You're going to go in a moment.
What?
You're going to look at Tom, and then you're going to...
I'm fine. Actually, I was on the way to pod earlier today, and you cross the river, and then you go through like a very short tunnel to get to the taxi rank, which I used to get to the podcast. And in the dark, as I was going through this small tunnel, like there are two people coming the other opposite direction, and like I was aware they'd kind of like glanced at me and stuff, and I was like, okay, whatever. And then one of them stopped in front of me and started spinning his keys in a circular motion at me as I walked past. And I was like, okay, it's time not to ever make eye contact with this guy. Like, is this a mating call? Like, is this some sort of thing that's happening that I don't understand? And so I walked past and just like, I was in a really bad mood anyway because it was drizzling on me, and that's all it takes. So I came out the other end.
It's raining men.
Apparently so, yeah. Maybe that's just like a hotspot for something in Bath that I don't understand. But
That was a callback to a joke we made in the interval and no one wanted any context.
That's a good point.
Anyway.
But no, I'm not sure if I had that guy's audio diary, would I access it? Perhaps not. Maybe certain mysteries need to stay mysteries, perhaps, but that would be my example from today.
Yeah. Oh, God.
It was very strange.
You just get my audio diaries. Like when I explain how the Minions umbrella got stuck in the bramble bush about 2 feet up from where I actually can reach.
I mean, audio diary suggests that I find it and then willingly activate
Well, you find me and ask what the hell's happened.
You find me.
Well,
and you explain what the hell's happened. It's different. It's like being followed by an audio diary.
I usually need your help rectifying the situation, and then you're curious about how it happened.
Yes. Our final question.
Oh, thank God.
Wow.
It comes
I'm
from
so tired.
Simon. We've adequately answered the question, what if podcast, but too much? Episode 200. Simon writes, Dear CNC, please cast your mind back 200 episodes to that golden time when you all still worked in print media. A lot of us still worked in print media.
Wasn't there, didn't happen.
How is a magazine made? Do you use a glorified version of Google Docs or Photoshop? As writers, did you have any input over how your reviews were laid out? Or did you just mail a bunch of words to Graham and hope for the best? When you went to print, did you end up emailing some workshop somewhere, or is there something fancier? Are websites easier for you to write for now, or are they just more pressure? Do any of you guys miss the good old days? So many questions. Thanks for reading, everybody. Simon, P.S. I've been a PC Gamer subscriber for 15 years and I just realised I have no idea how it's made.
So, As somebody who has previously made a zine, I'm going to say that you photocopy all of your documents, and if you really understand the photocopier, you can do it double-sided, and then you lay them all out, and then you use a long-armed stapler, or you befriend somebody whose mum owns a long-armed stapler. You staple them, you realise you got the staples wrong, you re-staple them, then you fold them, then you cover the whole thing in glitter, and you sell it for 50p.
That's
Pretty
how
much
publishing
exactly
works.
that. Yeah. It's kind of interesting because the three of us have all done this quite a lot. And it's funny to notice that nobody knows how we did that.
And I remember talking to a journalist at a different magazine who was flabbergasted that we did not lay out our own articles. Like, he worked at a place where just, like, the person who wrote the article would also, like, edit the InDesign document where they decided where the images, like, not only would they take the images, but they'd also decide which images went where and how the text flowed around them, and they would just have to lay out everything. Whereas at PC Gamer, in my time at least, it was always, there is a writer, and the writer does the words, and they supply images, screenshots, but then somebody else decides which ones go where and which ones are good enough to display, and how the text flows around them and how the text fits. And that's, two different people's jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, you have a flat plan in a piece of proprietary software, which is the map of the issue. And then each page spread is written, then laid out in InDesign, not Photoshop, but according to the magazine's templates. At PCG, that would always mean providing the words and the screenshots and so on, at which point the art editor would choose which pictures went where, at which point it went back to the writer to figure out what captions went where, because obviously that depends on the pictures. And then it would go to a production editor for making it good. Thanks, Tony Ellis. And then to, like, several processes of editing. I don't know, like, how much of this process is of interest to people, really. But
I remember being really pissed off with, there was a sort of letter from, I think it was Giles Corran. Does that name ring any bells?
Yeah.
To the editor of whatever paper it was he wrote his opinion column for at the Times.
Yeah.
And he was chewing out their production editors for editing his copy in any way at all. He was furious that they had changed a single letter of his copy because he considered it absolutely
sacrosanct.
Yeah, exactly, sacrosanct. And he was explaining to them, basically, like, he made a sort of subtle, clever joke that they had not understood, and they had edited it in a way that ruined the joke, but, preserved some of the words. And that was his evidence for how they are useless hacks, and he is a god, and we should never dare to touch his words. But his joke was just wildly obtuse. It was just like, the reason the people editing it didn't get it is because most people won't get it, and it just didn't make a lot of sense. And his claim, his demand that, from now on, never change a single word of my copy ever, is just wildly unrealistic, because you just can't fit it to a page in that case. You just can't lay it out in a way that works on a page. Like, there's a thing called magazine craft, and you have to actually lay out text and pictures in a way that makes sense for the format you're delivering it in, and that, unfortunately, is diametrically opposed to a writer's preciousness about their own
for sure.
copy.
Like, you could come up with the best title in the universe, but if it goes over, like, the line limit for that thing and looks hideous or just doesn't fit, you can't use it.
Which is the fate of many of the best puns you will never hear.
And to be honest, having someone between you and the audience who acts as a filter, and if he doesn't get your joke or they don't get your joke, it doesn't make it through, is a positive thing. I have been saved from myself many times by that.
It helps because they're not attached to that joke, so they can just cut it if that's the easiest way of making it work.
What you're saying, Tom, is that you've been saved by that point, not by that process, but by specifically Tony Ellis.
Yeah.
You
need someone really good in that role.
Like, this is the thing, like, mags are a collaborative process, and that's what, part of this question was how is a magazine made, and the answer is it's made a multi-stage process in InDesign, and we use Google Docs for text, but not for laying anything out, and some proprietary software in-house. And the other question is, how does it relate to working on the web? And the big difference is the absence of that process. Like,
Yeah, 100%.
you know, and that's not to say,
Elements of it survive, like, for example, with headlines and with,
yeah,
particular...
and it depends on the outlet again,
Yeah.
but like, it's not to say that people can't be absolutely brilliant, dazzling writers online. It's just a different skill set, because the magazine print craft is often very collaborative and has multiple stages of checks and balances built in. The web isn't like that, 'cause it needs to be more reactive.
It has to be really fast, and I think like the best writing comes from opposition, from editors, and from someone coming back at you. And that's the thing I've really lacked writing online in recent years, where I've just been like running my own tiny ship on PC Gamer UK side, is that there's no editor who has the time to like come back at me on stuff, and that's what makes you better. That's what makes all writers better, is someone coming back at you and questioning what you're doing. Because that gives you that ability to. It teaches you how to criticize your own writing as well. Like you always like that editor, all the editors that come back at you go into your head and they become your kind of self-editor.
Yeah.
And for me, the most useful thing about being in the office was that I got not only that feedback on my own work, but also everybody else who submitted work during that time. I got to hear the feedback on their work as well, because I'm sitting next to the people who are like, hey, did you read this thing from this guy? Or didn't you think this was kind of bland? Or didn't you think this didn't make any sense? Or that like this,
often in rude
all
terms.
of that information just seeps into your brain, and
for sure.
oh shit, don't make that mistake. Or...
But then when you read your own work, once you've been in that environment, like you become your own editor at that point, but you still need editors to come at you.
Yeah.
And that, like any sort of Giles Corran style screed like that I hear, I immediately think they're an idiot.
Yeah. They're not a good writer. Like,
yeah,
writing is a craft at the end of the day. Like, you're not a novelist at this point. Like, you're not.
Well, novelists
novelists
have
need
editors.
fucking good editors. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, but you're not bestowing some kind of God-given truth. You are transmitting information, transmitting ideas, and if that's not effective, it's not effective. And I think print is a really good
I
training
suppose
ground
there
for
is
that
a
attitude.
difference between being a staff writer and a named columnist in terms of like your function, but like it doesn't mean that you get to be a dick.
No, that's true. And like I think egoless writing is something that print is really good at teaching. I don't know, it's great. Like,
yeah, it's like print writing is, that process creates the best writing. Having worked on the web for a long time, definitely, I still completely believe that. It's just there's different like commercial pressures on web to be quick, and that has
for sure. And the absence of word counts and things is initially incredibly liberating, and then you realise that it's also stifling in some ways because it doesn't give you that sense of
I always
doneness.
limit quite carefully.
Want to add in the part about like what happens once it's all in the documents and stuff, because like that's a part that is a crucial step between what gets to this person.
So the journey of an article is copy, which starts up as a Google Doc, usually delineated into segments based on whatever the article's going to be, obviously, plus a zip file full of images that gets sent to an art editor who turns it into a page in InDesign that looks like something resembling a magazine page, probably overrunning and missing a bunch of stuff. That gets sent to a production editor who turns it into a page with that fits the page, for one thing, that fits it exactly and looks nice with pull quotes and that sort of thing. PC Gamer at that point would probably be sent to the writer again for captions and other kind of miscellaneous page bits that could probably come from the writer but might not necessarily in every case. At which point it goes back to art for kind of final tweaks, at which point it gets generated into a PDF, which is then first point reviewed by the deputy editor of the magazine, and it's then reviewed by the editor of the magazine, and then is reviewed by the art editor of the magazine. Having been signed off 3 times, is then eligible to be printed and published, which is kind of a remarkable amount of checks and balances.
But that's where integrity comes from. That's where consistency, quality control, and integrity comes from. Is that process?
Buy magazines, everybody.
Yeah,
magazines are great. Honest to God, like, best job I've had in this business was deputy editor of PC Gamer. Like, bar none. Like, until going freelance. Like, yeah.
I just meant like there's the stage after, which I think maybe the person was asking about, because you don't press print.
I see what you
That's
mean.
what I was getting at.
So once everything in the magazine is approved through all 3 stages of that approval, it goes to a central production team at the publisher who vet it for print readiness, at which point it gets sent to a third-party publishing, like printing company, who print the tens of thousands or so copies are actually necessary and bind them and do all the rest of that. But yeah, that side of it is external to.
But that's
Yeah, like you don't go into the future
Yeah,
offices and there's
you-
like a big news machine like whirring in the
No,
background.
we don't have a big.
basically.
Yeah, we don't have that kind of like crash zoom in on fresh off the presses,
Shooting out all
Yeah,
those copies
exactly.
into-
That doesn't happen.
Like get
I say we.
decapitated by a disc in the olden days. You know?
I really
It's
need
like-
to stop saying we. That's a really important thing.
Yeah, I still do that, and it's been 4 years.
that point where it goes to that third party though is often quite tense if you're running something a cover feature that's dependent on an embargo where you have a exclusive, etc.
Yeah, indeed.
You're suddenly relying on a third party production studio to not leak it, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots of elements to this, and yeah, we're getting a bit inside baseball, but it's the end of the podcast, and everyone's probably left already.
Well, they did ask.
Well, they did ask.
How is sausage made? That's how the sausage is made.
But yeah, I thought that part might be important because, like, I think if anyone like imagines a newsroom entirely based on like, you know, pop culture, you
Sam
get,
isn't
like,
somewhere like cranking a big printer, like making the magazine come out. Like,
you're not all rushing to like payphones,
like we always used to see it.
phoning in a story.
Our review of Tacoma is just down this line in
Walking outside Key House saying, read all about it.
Yeah. The end of the
Witcher
process.
3 is quite good.
The end of the process was always the files going to the print process, not us delivering them to the printer.
And everybody decamping to the Hobgoblin.
Yeah, and then we get pissed.
I used to, when I was disc editor, my deadline was sort of similar to the rest of the mag, but totally separate. In the, you know, I was just working to my own deadline, and entirely responsible for it. And if it was basically, I had to get it to a different building in town by a certain time of the day, and making the interface and making all the cover disc and, you know, everything work was one thing, and then burning it to a disc back in those days took literally like an hour and a half. It was like 90 minutes to burn a DVD. And it was like a 90 gigabyte double-sided DVD, and sometimes that would just fail and you had to do it again, and so that was like another 90 minutes. And when you're trying to get to a courier who leaves at noon, that's an awkward thing. And if that happened, if I went over the deadline, I had to like book a special courier that was going to cost more money. But if I wasn't, I had to get it to this certain building in Bath by a certain time. So I would be burning it to disc. I had to run from my building to the building where you can burn the discs, burn the discs for 90 minutes. And then when I had the burnt discs, put them in an envelope and then like sprint to the other building in Bath and deliver it there by this certain deadline. And then if I did it, then that was it, like me done for the day. And I would go and get a carrot cake milkshake at Shakeaway. That was my celebration each month.
This is basically like the worst version of a movie, like, you know, like a bomb defusal scene. Like, is the disc going to burn? Is Tom going to be able to get his
If it doesn't, I can get the later courier. And it's somewhat inconvenient to the company I work for, but I don't truly know what the cost of this is.
I may or may not get my milkshake.
If it's the burner's fault, I don't feel too bad about it.
Websites are much easier.
They are,
Yeah.
Almost to their deficit.
indeed.
We ran out of questions, everybody.
Hooray.
Hey! And that's episode 200.
You have to remember all of the
Hooray.
things to end with now.
I'm going to be completely fine. You wait. You wait and see.
Okay.
You watch this happen.
Tacoma. Just want to insert that here.
And meanwhile, in Pip's head,
Ducks.
what is it about ducks, Pip?
They're great.
This is the audio diary that we should have answered with in the previous question.
You can scrub through it
Yeah.
backwards
It's like
and
if
forwards.
you scrub back to like Pip's beginning of this entire podcast, it's just like ducks,
But where was Pig at the start of it?
ducks.
It's because we watched that Pets film.
You're looking at Tom, but you mean to be looking at me.
No, I was looking for recognition
Secret
on
Life of
anyone's
Pets.
face. Yeah,
You should have looked at me, the person who watched that film with you.
Okay, well,
Unless you watch Babe 2, Pig in the
Pig
City.
in the City.
Which I totally
No, alas. But so that film has a rabbit who is sort of weirdly mourning the death of his colleague, a duck. And I was wondering about the inner life of that duck, and I've been thinking about that duck for a lot of the time, and just ducks more generally, and duck eggs, because they're quite pretty. And then I'm so tired. I just affixed on ducks because it's an easy word and they're quite nice. And I was just imagining a lovely white duck with its lovely feathers like flapping around, but not a swan because they're horrible. So just nice.
Ducks are they're monsters, like, socially.
Not like mallards that like do awful, unspeakable things. I was just imagining, like those
bank robberies.
the tall ducks,
Yeah, so the duck in Babe, Pig in the City, I thought it was a goose, but I looked it up and
Yeah.
apparently it's a duck.
Yeah.
And I mean, that one, he's a bit of a wise guy,
Oh, really?
personality-wise.
What? Are you saying this... Are you saying that your opinion of this duck was lesser when you knew more about the performer?
No, well, I mean, the duck is given a personality by the speech that is imposed upon him. The actor duck might have been different. Might have been a very different person.
I don't think they use a duck as the actor. I think it's a human. I think that's how they got the human speech effect.
No, but there was the duck was doing the acting, right? And then the human was doing the talking.
Yeah, so I think actually the duck might have been a puppet. A lot of the animals in Babe are CGI in some way, but this one really looked like a puppet.
Okay, I haven't seen Babe, and I haven't seen Babe 2 because I probably wouldn't have understood it because I hadn't seen Babe 1.
Yeah, it is. I watched this film because Brendan Chung, creator of 30 Flights of Loving and many other games, has been telling me for years.
Quadrilateral Cowboy?
Yeah, that this is one of the greatest films ever made, and he's a student of cinema. This is his education. He came from a cinema background. Went into games.
But he's not a student of ducks, is he?
Well,
Is anybody?
Duckologists.
Is that a thing?
Yes.
Did you make that up?
it's hard to know, isn't it? Pippa's giving a narrow-eyed look to Chris. Waving her hand.
She's done the full part of the Pip's telling a lie dance, which is narrowing the eyes and then doing the kind of the hand wave.
Who can know? Someone must be an expert in ducks. Because otherwise we wouldn't know about ducks. That stands to reason.
You wouldn't believe how close I was to ending this podcast.
This is the best part. I feel like I'm on form now. I've woken up.
Anyway, Babe 2 is pretty good. It
I'm
gets
entirely
surprisingly
here.
dark, surprisingly fast. I would say
Really?
within the first half hour of its 2-hour running time, you're already like, a hospital is on fire, a clown is sobbing.
How does Babe get to the city?
Plane.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Why is he on a plane? Or she? He.
It's a he. It is played by a female actor, though.
Alright, we've been doing this for close to 4
It's time
hours.
to end. It's time
We
to
don't
end.
have time to recap all of Big Pip in the City.
In the city.
Pip in the City.
Excuse me.
Oh no. The first one
Pip
was,
in the City. The sheep Pip.
Yes.
You can find our website.
If you would...
What? CrateandCrowbar.com?
That's it.
That is all of the questions and anecdotes and tangents we have time for. If you'd like to send us a question, anecdote, tangent, grudge, and
don't.
so on for a future episode, you can do so by emailing us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also email us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can always Twitter us at Crate and Crowbar. I looped a little bit there. You probably didn't notice.
It's a glitch in the Matrix.
It was a glitch in the Matrix. It didn't even occur to you. Amazing.
What?
Nothing.
Me?
No.
Okay.
What?
You can tweet us individually.
Wait, hang on. There's more.
Oh shit.
If you would like to
Pay us
support
bacon.
the podcast for some reason after this 4-hour spectacular, you can do so by investigating our Patreon at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. You can also help us out by visiting us on YouTube at youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar and checking out our episode posts and Bloodborne videos and miniatures monthly episodes and so on, and clicking like and rate and subscribe and all the rest of the buttons that make things good. Another button that makes...
dislike.
Not this... No, shh. Never that. Another button that helps a lot is on iTunes. If you rate the episode on iTunes, it makes us more visible. We're also going to work to try and get the podcast more visible on other platforms, particularly Android platforms, because I know nothing about them and I'm informed every time someone tweets us telling us, why aren't you on this?
Is there a button you can click to make us more risible?
Risible?
Risible.
It's too late for that.
It's too late.
We're maximum risible.
We're maximum
Super
risible
sale.
now. If you would like to follow us as individuals, you can do so on twitter.com. I'm at CThurston, that's CTHURSTEN. Tom Senior.
At PCG Ludo, Ludo.
Tom Francis.
At Pentadact, PENT8080T.
Philippa War.
At Philippa War. PHILIPPAWARR.
Very good.
Thanks. I know my name. Pig in the City.
Pip, I can't believe you just did that with a street hand gesture that can't be described.
End the podcast. I want to go home.
You are home.
I want to be more at home. I want
Goodbye.
to leave.
See you in episode 201.
Oh no. I'll be there.
Thanks for listening,
everybody.
everybody.
Wow.
413 minutes.